Here we go. They're going to kick the field goal. It'll be Jason Chingel out of the hold of Mesco. Snap, good hold, and the kick is blocked. Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. One of the greatest upsets in sports history.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
All right, good morning, and good morning. Here we are on that proverbial hump day today. Casey McAllister, Paul Fritchner. Good morning, gentlemen. You guys look like you're still kind of scrambling around for today like I am. Is everything okay? How are you both?
We're doing
okay. That's not a good quick answer.
No, we're doing all right. I think your laptop is playing their show.
It is? Okay. All right, my bad.
There we go.
Okay. Forgive me. I like that music so much, I just keep it going all the time, and I try to sleep at night. Most people have that, what do they call it, white noise?
Yeah.
I just play that music reel over and over.
You fall asleep
start
on that?
again. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. Great.
Yeah.
It's a Wednesday. It's hump day. We got a great interview on tap today, Bronson Arroyo. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
really
I'm
excited about having Bronson Arroyo as our big interview. We do this each and every Wednesday. And, I mean, we've had guys like Anthony Munoz and Chris Collinsworth and Sean Casey and Barry Alvarez and on and on and on. Marty Brennaman, who, by the way, will be coming up in about 10 minutes to talk about what's going on in the World Series. How about that game last night? That crowd. I mean, if you're just a sports fan and you could hang out anywhere over the next 3 or 4 days, it would be at Citizens Bank Park because that place was rocking.
Yeah, all those home runs just back to back to back to back. It just and the way that Philly was hitting them, I thought it was an interesting point that kept getting brought up all night about whether Lance McCullers was tipping his pitches or not. And there was a good breakdown on Twitter of the way he was lifting his leg, the way he was just some little intricacies that maybe that was what Bryce talked about in the on-deck circle that led to that next home run. So, I thought last night's game was a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, if you missed it, Philadelphia hit 5 home runs in that game against Lance McCullers Jr. 7-0 shutout win for the Phillies. So they take a 2-1 advantage in the World Series. Game 4 will be tonight. Game 5 tomorrow night in Philadelphia, and if they have to go beyond that, they go back to Houston on Saturday and Sunday. There will still be, as we mentioned yesterday, that travel day on Friday. The college football playoff rankings came out yesterday for the first time. They wait till about halfway through the year, then they release the rankings. So last night they come out. I was not surprised, maybe you were. I was not surprised that Tennessee's number 1. I think when you look at their body of work, whom they've played, the teams they've beaten, primarily Alabama, in that phenomenal game a couple of weeks ago in Knoxville, I think they've earned the right to be number 1. I think Ohio State has certainly earned the right to be number 2, although their strength of schedule, as we know, has not been good. I was surprised at the lack of strength of schedule by Georgia. It was explained last night. Georgia, by the way, number 3. And Tennessee and Georgia play one another this weekend. That's down in Athens. Georgia's strength of schedule is 75th in college football. And playing in the SEC, that's not normally the case. But the point was made last night by, I think, Joey Galloway on that college football playoff ranking show that, you know, in any given year in the SEC, you have certain crossover games and teams you have to play. This has been a year where Georgia is not playing during the regular season. They're not playing LSU. They're not playing Alabama. They haven't played some of the teams that would bring that strength of schedule up. The number 4 team I was stunned, and that was Clemson. We pointed out yesterday, fellas, you know, if you're buying into the ACC, we talked yesterday that Clemson has beaten the likes of Wake Forest, and they're in the top 25. NC State, they're in the top 25 of the rankings. They beat Syracuse, who then got just blistered by Notre Dame at home. So I don't know how good they are. But they were ranked ahead of Michigan. And this is where it comes back to your strength of schedule again. I think anybody that has watched Clemson or anyone that has watched Michigan, I don't know to the eye test how you don't say that Michigan is clearly a better team. And believe me, it pains me to speak glowingly about Michigan in any form or fashion. But were you guys not stunned? I was stunned that Clemson is ranked in front of Michigan. Michigan is 5. We'll get to 6 and 7 here in a minute. But Michigan is behind Clemson, who made a quarterback change to win a game over Syracuse. Surprised?
Initially, I was pretty surprised, but then after about 5 minutes and I sat back and I thought about it, I'm not all that shocked, only because I think what the committee is setting this up to do is for one of Ohio State and Michigan to get in the postseason. If Michigan beats Ohio State when they play each other, then Michigan's in and Ohio State might be out. So I think that's the way they're setting it up. The initial rankings do look a little funky because, like you and we all agreed on our top 4 yesterday, I thought Michigan deserved to be in. But right now I don't think it really matters because if Michigan beats Ohio State, then they'll be in. So that's, to me, how that's setting up.
Then you get to 6 and 7. Now, I have never been a big fan of the Big 12. You see a lot of high-scoring games and that kind of thing. But TCU is ranked 7th. That is behind Alabama, of course, who has a loss to Tennessee. TCU's undefeated. Now, you know, you play who you play. And they did something that's only been done 3 times in the last 20 years. And that's beat 4 ranked teams in 1 calendar month. I don't know what else TCU has to do. You know, look, you're going to have to start rooting for this team to lose a game. Alabama, you know, Ohio State or Michigan, one of them's going to lose a game. You got to win out. And perhaps if TCU wins out, TCU gets in. But, boy, I was just really surprised at Alabama, who has not played a tough schedule. And I think it is safe to say that if Quinn Ewers, the opening game of the season against Texas, who throws for 150 yards in the first half against Alabama, but he gets knocked out with an injury. I know woulda, coulda, shoulda we're playing here. But if Ewers plays in that game, I think Alabama gets beat by Texas. But, you know, we'll see what happens. At any rate, Marty Brennaman ready to go?
Yes, he is.
He's dialed in. The Hall of Famer. I mean, he set record numbers on the big interview last week, right, Paul?
He did.
Huge numbers for Marty Brennaman.
Yep.
And he joins us from his palatial estate somewhere in the hills of Anderson Township. That's a good look you got going on there today with the background and the zip up and the whole 9 yards. How are you doing on this beautiful Wednesday?
It's the same damn background I always have unless I'm in Carolina.
Well, I mean, really. For some reason it looks like you have it lit better. Maybe that's the sun coming in. I don't know what it is. It just looks a little better.
Well, I appreciate that. Can I make a point before we get started?
Of course.
You need to listen to Paul more about this. I know you lost your mind because Michigan is behind Clemson. I understand that.
Yep.
I know you've got a severe case of angst because TCU has beaten 4 ranked teams and they're still, I think, number 7. You know, it is what it is. I felt the same way you did last year about UC. I anguished every week, wondering if they were going to, make the Final Four, which they did. And even though they didn't win, they certainly acquitted themselves rather well. You just got to wait. We got, 3 more of these stupid shows on ESPN before they determine what the final rankings are? Is that right?
They do. They do.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that when you initially look at the body of work for all these teams, and I think the guy, I'm assuming that Boo Corrigan is the son of Gene Corrigan. Is that right? Do you know?
I don't know that for certain, Tom, but I got to feel like he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think so.
He's the head of the college. Go ahead.
I knew his dad very well. And if he's as much of a classy act as his dad was, then he's going to be fine.
Yeah, he's the guy that's the head of the College Football Playoff Committee. He's the athletic director at North Carolina State. And he's a guy that's got to sit in the hot seat for the next 6-7 weeks, because they do this show every single Tuesday night. They come out with new rankings. He's obligated to come on the show and answer questions from that entire panel they have up there, Herb Street and Joey Galloway and David Pollard. Who else is on there? I don't know. But Reese Davis, I think. And
Reese Davis.
Yeah, so, I mean, he handled himself well last night. And he talked about, why one team was ranked ahead of another team and so on and so forth. So he's got that going on the next number of weeks. I want to ask you, however, a little bit about the World Series. And, Bronson Arroyo is our big interview coming up a little bit later on today. And I'm going to ask him a little bit about momentum and reflecting back, and you remember it well, to that 2012 playoff where the Reds won the first 2 games in a best-of-5 out in San Francisco. They had not lost 3 games in a row all year long at home. Of course they did. And we remember Hunter Pence jumping up and down in the dugout and all that kind of thing. I just wonder, Dad, and look, that could all change in a heartbeat tonight. I understand that. It's only 2 games to 1. But this Phillies team just has a look about them. They just have the look about them that they are going to win this thing. Are you sensing that at all or no?
Yeah, I think I don't know that it's true every year, but there are years when more often than not, when a team gets to where the Phillies are and nobody picked them to be there. But things occur. I know you and I referenced a few weeks ago, I think, that Cardinal club back in the early part of this century when I think they finished the regular season 81-81 and got in by the skin of their teeth and ended up being world champions. I just think there are certain teams that seem to carry with them a sense, an aura of success that you don't have that same feel for with the team they're playing, or teams that were eliminated early in the postseason scheme of things. But I mean, when you come out and Lance McCullers is no chopped liver now, and you hit 5 home runs in one game, and I think 4 of them were all for him, and maybe all 5. I'm not sure, but they just have a certain look about them. The kid that pitched last night, Ranger Suarez, was outstanding for 5 innings, and you're right, things can change with a Houston win tonight. And I think if you could label a game, a single game, and I know it's hard to do. Over the course of a baseball season, you could label a single game an absolute must-win for the Astros. It is without question tonight, without any question.
I don't know how privy you were or cared to be, quite frankly. Baseball is no different than any other sport or in any other business. You're always looking for that one little thing, that edge that can spell winning, can spell losing. McCullers has pitched all year long, and like you said, he's been a good pitcher. He pitched in the postseason before this World Series appearance last night, and much was made of him tipping pitches. Do you think that some teams and or players are better at being able to find out something like that? Because, I mean, why didn't it rear its ugly head before now? All of a sudden, this is a huge deal when he's pitching in the World Series. I understand it's more magnified. But do you think it's possible the Phillies were able to dissect something that maybe everybody else missed?
Have you seen the video?
I've seen the video.
The 2 videos side by side.
Yeah.
There is no question he tipped his pitches. Because when he would go into his windup, and I didn't read or listen to it because it was very early this morning. I didn't want to wake anybody up. He would come here when he started to raise his leg, and the other video had him coming this high up above his head. There was no question that he was tipping his pitches. Now, what this meant, what pitch it was here as opposed to what was here, I don't know. But, when they talk about what's his name, Bryce Harper, going back and telling the kid very quick meeting before he went to the plate. What's his name, Pond or Bone or whatever it is,
Yeah.
third baseman, and then he hits a line drive home run to left. I think there's something to that. And I think there's certain people that have an innate ability to concentrate on a pitcher, and certainly players have plenty of time to do that when they're in the dugout before they go on the field or when they come to the plate. Certain people can pick that stuff up. And there's no question in my mind that the conversation dealt with the fact that he had a different motion for one pitch as opposed to another.
All right, well, if that's true, and I agree with you that's true, there has to be some fault on those sitting in the Astros dugout.
No question. No question. And I don't understand if a Bryce Harper can pick up a difference in motion that will predict what the next pitch is coming to the plate on, then I cannot imagine in my wildest dreams why in the world that there wasn't someone in that Astros dugout that could say, hey, hold the phone and go to Dusty and say, we got a problem out here because he's tipping his pitches. I could not agree with you more, because there has to be somebody in that Houston dugout who fashions himself as a guy that if there's any inconsistency in a pitcher's motion, he ought to be able to pick that up. I have not seen any comment come out of the Astros clubhouse, and certainly whatever inside information Bryce Harper passed on to his teammate, they're not going to reveal what that was. And they're going to put the onus now on the back of Houston in the event the Astros can win a game or two and extend this thing and get it back to Houston before McCullers goes back to the mound to figure out what that problem is.
You know Dusty Baker very well. He is a friend of yours. I know you think the world of him, and you're rooting for him to finally get off the schneid to win a World Series. When you sit there and you think about what he might be thinking about, I am convinced, and maybe you will totally disagree, I think this means the world to him. I don't think that he is going to not make the Hall of Fame as a manager if he doesn't win a World Series. He's earned the right to be in the Hall of Fame as a manager. I think everybody agrees with that. But I think
Correct.
There's a part of him deep in his soul that will fill an enormous void if he can't win this thing. You agree with that?
I agree with you 100%. And I really don't feel, and again, I'll go further than that. I don't think that he gives a rightful damn what his detractors say if they want to be stupid enough to say, well, he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame because he's never won a World Series. That's the biggest bunch of crap I've ever heard. You're right. His body of work is so overwhelming that whether he wins this series or not, he's going to one day have a plaque in Cooperstown. But I think the competitiveness of this man, and he has incredible competitiveness, he will have a void in his heart for the rest of his life if he cannot win a World Series. I really, truly believe that.
Do you think that they bring him back if they don't win a World Series?
Oh, boy, that's a good question, because there's been all kinds of dissension internally involving Jim Crane, the owner, and the general manager, and Dusty. Dusty, he may be the only manager in baseball that uses less analytics than anybody else in the game in that position. And he's been able to get away with it, but at the expense of I guess, from everything I hear, big disagreements that go on entirely during the season between he and the general manager over the way things should be done. And more often than not, Dusty will do things his way. There are those who would have said when this series began that if they fail, that one, possibly both, but only one in all likelihood, will be looking for a job. And that would be the GM, and that would be Dusty. Jim Crane, obviously, is the owner. He's got to make a decision. And I think he would surprise everybody if he brought both of them back. But, I mean, I cannot imagine losing this series and the fans be happy with the fact that Dusty was let go, because I think you have to go back to when he ascended to the position, when he was hired to manage, the chaos that existed in that franchise over cheating and things of that nature. And if God ever put a man on this earth that was the right man to calm things down there and lead them forward, it was Dusty Baker. So I think I know how bad Houston wants to win. Every team, when they get where they are right now, wants to win a World Series. But I think it would be criminal if they let Dusty Baker go just because he was unable to win this series.
I've never asked you this, but I'm curious to your answer. Do you think baseball should have stepped in and not awarded a World Series winner that season that Houston did win it, knowing what we know now?
Absolutely, without any question. And like so many other things that go on in this game, led by this guy, they could not pull the trigger. And I think about what the NCAA does, whether it be football, which you've never had a problem with. It's always been basketball, or seemingly so. I don't think they would have hesitated. And they haven't in the past. And it was almost without any internal discussion that went on and on and on. They made a decision, and that was that. I'm shocked, and I was disappointed that baseball didn't have the guts to pull the plug on them. I really was.
Are you surprised, with that in mind, that guys like A.J. Hinch and Alex Cora have been given another chance to come back and manage again, even though they were right in the middle of all of it? And Carlos Beltran got let go before he even started managing the New York Mets.
And hasn't gotten the job back yet.
No.
Yeah, I was. But if I had to lean toward one as opposed to the other, I think I would have been more likely to give A.J. Hinch another chance than I would have Joey Cora, because I think Joey Cora was smack in the middle of it. I think first in Houston and then later on in Boston.
All right, so college basketball is getting ready to start up. Your North Carolina Tar Heels are preseason number 1 in the country. Are they the best team in the country?
Yeah, I say they are, and for a lot of reasons. I mean, they got all their people back except for Brady Manick, and they replaced him with the kid out of Northwestern, Pete Nance, who apparently has fit in perfectly in filling the role. Nobody will ever replace Manick in the job he did, but Pete Nance is a great guy, and then the other 4 guys are all back. Plus, in fact, they've got more depth. They've got more quality players coming off that bench now than certainly last year. And I think even beyond that, in the last years that Roy Williams coached that team. So I think if there's a team that deserves to be number 1, I think Carolina certainly does deserve that, with great prejudice, I might add.
Well, our good friend over here, one of our good friends, Paul Fritchner, is losing his mind as his alma mater, Xavier, has brought back Sean Miller to be the head coach. And, Paul, you were at Madison Square Garden about a week and a half ago for the Big East Basketball Media Day.
Yeah, I'm excited for this season. I think, especially in this area, I think that Cincinnati's trending in the right direction. NKU was picked at the top of the Horizon League. Xavier is going to be relevant again. They've been picked pretty much a consensus top 4 team in the Big East. So I think things are and look at Dayton, too. They're a top 25 team. And deservedly so, especially for Dayton after what happened in 2020 with the opportunity that they were so cruelly taken away from after Obi Toppin and everybody didn't get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament. So, Cincinnati's a college hoops town in this time of the year. No NBA team around this area, really. So it's exciting, and we're less than a week away. Xavier plays an exhibition tonight, and things get rolling on Monday.
It gets to a question very similar to the one we were talking about a second ago, and I don't mean to be controversial here, but I think this is a fair question. You just alluded a second ago, Dad, about Alex Cora and
I know where you're going with this.
That's right, and A.J. Hinch.
I know where you're going.
They got another chance, and you made reference to college basketball and the NCAA. It seems to me, tell me if you agree or disagree, it seems to me that the NCAA has fallen into a serious habit of going after the quote-unquote, I'm not going to say little guy, but they are quite hesitant to go after the big guys. And I'm talking about the big guys in Arizona who are running that operation. I'm talking about what was going on at Kansas and everything there. And there are others. It seems to me they're looking the other way on some of this stuff. Am I wrong about that?
You're absolutely 100% correct. And my feeling on that is they want to eliminate paying players or whatever illegality a coach and his staff have been charged with. They got to go after the head man. They got to go after the head man hard. And if they can prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that he was smack in the middle of cheating, they should be banned from coaching at the NCAA level for life. And you want to talk about putting it away for good? When you stand the chance of losing your job. But I agree with you. NCAA cannot deny that they have yet to, wherever it might be Arizona, it might be Kansas, wherever it might be, they have yet to throw the book at a coach. And the bigger he is, the less likelihood. Now, look at Chris Mack. They got Chris Mack. Chris Mack, I think, is a good coach. Chris Mack was involved in some problem down there. And they were not quick to dispatch him. Whether they put enough pressure on U of L to get rid of him, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is he's gone. Now, had that been one of the big names in the game, not a chance that would have happened. Not one single chance. And they can say all they want to, that they are fair, but until the day comes when they can prove beyond anything that a head coach was at the forefront of the cheating that was going on at XU, or not Xavier, but using whatever university it might be, then you got to say you're done. You go sell encyclopedias or something because you're done with this. And I think that's the only way you can stop it. But I don't think you'll. And the NCAA is a joke. Are you kidding me? It's an absolute joke. And I say that because I worked, at the tournaments that I've worked for all those years and listened to some of the stuff that went down. There's no question to me it's the most useless organization on the face of this earth.
All right. We have Bronson Arroyo coming up today. And I'm curious, of all the players that have come through the Reds organization in your 46, 47 years here with the franchise, was there a more likable guy than that guy?
No. Other than maybe Sean Casey.
Yeah, right.
I think they would be the big two in the last 25 years, 30 years. He's just a good guy. There's no pretense about him. He is what he is. I never have seen him cross with anybody. And for a guy who at one time felt like being traded from Boston to Cincinnati was one of the low points in his career, the affection that developed between he and this city and he and this organization is just amazing, and it's a credit to him as a person. I'll tell you the greatest story of all, and I'm not saying this because I'm involved, but Rick Stowe heads up the clubhouse, and there have been, to my knowledge, 2 shirts that have been awarded to individuals because of a lot of different positive things that the clubhouse guys wear. Every day during the season, they have I don't know whether they have their names on them or not, but they're distinctive white shirts that they work in. The 2 people that I'm aware of were myself and Bronson Arroyo. And I don't, to do it for a player, it was so justified and so welcomed and so appreciated by him. I just think it's, they'll induct him into the Reds Hall of Fame next year, and it will be an overwhelmingly happy night and an overwhelmingly successful night because there's no doubt that he was a tremendous fan favorite here.
All right, Dad, we thank you as always for your time and your insight on multiple topics.
How about the NCAA?
Well, like I said, you're in. I mean, you've been there. I mean, look, you've been there. You called all those NCAA tournament games. You called college basketball seemingly forever and a day. You've been there. much more limited around college basketball. I've been there, and I mean, you sit around, and if you're lucky enough to be around some of the people that are involved, you start looking around and say, wait a minute, why that guy and why not that guy? And you hear some of the stuff that comes out of them. I remember sitting next to a guy high up, nameless, on a plane and getting into a discussion on Bob Huggins. And if they could have proven anything on Huggins, they'd have thrown the book at him. But they couldn't have proven anything.
And I think they have vendettas sometime. I really, truly do.
There's no doubt.
But the thing, let me tell you, but down the road now, I know you got to go, but in future weeks, it's going to be my goal to say something so outrageous that you will pull that famous move you pull when Tracy's on. And that's to drop your head and put your hand over your forehead and just do that.
Well,
I mean, Tracy and I talked about that the other day. I said that is the key to one of those comments that bounce off 17 walls before it finally comes to rest. So
he'll be back with us tomorrow. I don't know if you saw him yesterday, but he's on his second vacation in the last 3 weeks. He was down in Mexico before. Now he's along the west coast of Florida. He is blaming his wife, Danae, for once again putting down tens of thousands of dollars on a place that he refers to as a dump.
He is?
Yeah. I mean, he said the house they got yesterday, and he said that I got all kinds of family coming in, and we could see the Gulf in the background. And he said it is not up to his standards in any form or fashion. It's like 10,000 square feet, apparently, this house. It looked very nice, the shot we had of him yesterday, but he's not happy.
He's got a lot of money. You know that, don't you?
Well, he tells us that.
A lot of money. He really, truly does. You might bring that up and say that I said that.
We might run that clip. We might run that clip.
Now, I'm going to be – yeah, please do, because I think if he says he doesn't, then he needs to make his peace with the Almighty.
Well, you are going to be joining us next week. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I hope so.
You're going to be attempting to join us next week from the high seas of the Atlantic. Is that correct?
I tell you what. No, that's not true. The high seas of the Caribbean. That's
not the Atlantic. That's the Atlantic Ocean.
Wait a minute. It's a hell of a lot of difference between the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean, believe me. In color, in temperature, the whole 9 yards. I'm an expert. But you might tell Casey that I may just call in the day before and see how successful we are if I can just punch up privately.
Absolutely.
Talk to him, and I'll call you, and we'll try and figure something out. I'd love to do it from the ship, and if all possible, then that's where we'll do it next Wednesday.
Is that a 5-star ship or is that a 6-star ship?
It'd probably be 5 and 7/8, I think. Yeah,
I never heard of a 6 until Tracy came along. I've heard of 5-star results.
I'm not even addressing what he said. I heard that 6-star crap when he dropped that on you. That's not going to happen here. Believe me, that won't happen. And I will carry your hellos to you from people like Jack Billingham and Dimitri Young.
Oh, yeah.
And Jim Maloney. They'll all say hello to you.
Absolutely. We'll tell them I said the same. All right.
I surely will.
I'll talk to you.
Love you too, pal.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye. Right. There you have it. Marty Brennaman right there getting after it.
Next week.
After your guys, Paul, at the NCAA. Those are your guys.
Oh, no. The NCAA? No, not the NCAA.
Boy, I mean, he took on today Rob Manfred.
Yeah.
Right. He took on the NCAA. Am I forgetting somebody? In that whole exchange?
I mean, that probably checks a couple big boxes.
I'd say it's a couple big boxes. Right. All right. We got Bronson Arroyo coming up in about 10 minutes. We're going to come back and pick up some of this college football stuff. By the way, there is a leader in the Mid-American Conference. Maction began last night.
Yeah.
Buffalo was undefeated, came rolling into Peden Stadium in Athens, Ohio. Beautiful night in A-Town. And Curtis Rourke, outside of that pick six, his quarterback at OU, is having an unbelievable year. And they took it to Buffalo last night, put 45 on them last night. And the Bobcats sit atop the MAC East. Can they win out and go to the Mid-American Conference title game?
So here's my question. If they go to the MAC title game, are we all going?
You know, I think we should go. I think they play that game every year, I think, at Ford Field.
Yes.
Yes, which is great because you're inside. That's an incredible building. All the years I did the NFL, I know that's a little older than maybe the one in Minnesota and certainly the one in Dallas and the one in Phoenix and all that. But, I mean, that building is still – you guys been in that building?
I've not.
Nope.
Boy, I tell you what, man, that is a great place to watch a football game.
Do you know, like, any of the directors there, athletic directing, anything like that?
At OU?
Yeah, at
yes.
OU. Maybe we should try to get, like, a 30-minute show there in the stadium at some point.
You know, if
that title
if
game,
the MAC would
happens.
let us, I mean, there are all these kind of weird deals that when you get into games like that, somebody owns the rights to the game. I would imagine that's ESPN. If I'm guessing off the top of my head, it's probably a pretty good guess. They have the rights to the game, and sometimes they force you to go outside. We ain't going outside in Detroit.
Right. I mean, just like the post game though. We wouldn't be showing anything from the game
during the game, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But we would react to.
It'd be nice.
To know
It may
you
not
win,
be a bad
obviously.
idea. The Bobcats.
The Bobcats.
They're going to have a good basketball team this year too, brother.
Yeah.
They're going to be good.
This whole area is going to have a good year.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Between UC, Xavier,
NKU?
NKU,
Dayton?
Ohio U should be good. Dayton, we talked about. They're already ranked in the preseason top 25. It should be really good. All right, we're going to take a quick timeout. We'll come back, talk a little bit about this college football playoff thing or whatever else comes to mind. Who's on board here? We got hundreds, if not thousands, of watching.
Boom Shakalaka's back.
I love that nickname. Boom Shakalaka. That's big time. What is this? Glad to hear you're taking care of Thom and allowing him some vacation.
So that was probably directed to Marty.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, maybe not. I don't know.
Well, Marty's the one on vacation.
Marty's
Although
on
I will
vacation.
not be here Friday, so just as a programming note, we are going to make our picks tomorrow. We still have Tracy Jones. We'll have Paul Doherty tomorrow. But we're going to make our picks because I'm on my way down to Fort Worth, Texas to watch the mighty TCU Horned Frogs tee it up. High noon. Urban Meyer and company will be there for the Big Fox noon game, the pregame show in Fort Worth, Texas.
Horned Frogs.
It's going to be about 72 degrees down there, sunshine. It's going to be nice. We're back in a moment.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
and you look this up in a medical book, he's got FSB.
FS what?
FSB. It's short for fatal sperm backup.
Oh, my God.
Thom, see, the married men know what I'm talking about. I didn't have this until I got married, but I've got the affliction a little bit at times. And Thom, do you ever suffer now that you don't have that job with Fox and you're not bringing home the big checks? Do you have FSB?
You know what? I get it. I totally get what you're saying.
There's a lot of truth to that.
I can't believe I'm admitting this on a show we're just starting. That we're talking about the acronym of FSB.
What is
that
it?
what you said?
Say it, Thom.
FSB.
No, not the acronym. Say the whole thing. The three words.
Sperm backup. Is that right?
There we go. Okay. Hey, Thom, you know, we've experienced it since we got married, but ask those two guys, the producers. Now, they've experienced that their whole life, so they really don't see any adjustment. They've experienced it. They've had it their own life.
Well, I thought you were making the argument that this only hits married men. I thought that's what you were saying. These guys aren't married.
Well, I know, but they're not getting any. So they have FSB.
If I'm giving you some advice, I would stay away from gritties. I would just keep it to a simple 2-step. And I think baby steps.
Whoa. What? You would stay away from gritties? Why? You said you haven't seen it. I might have been great on it.
All right. I'm not going to place judgment yet. But based off of the information you've already given me, saying I'm an older white guy, you're already setting yourself up for something that I'm going to look at and I'm going to be like, I don't know about this one, Thom. I don't think you need to go hoodies and stuff. I think you just have to sacrifice something for the greater good of Houday. If you want the wins, you got to scruff it up a little bit.
Okay, I'll scruff it up Monday. I'll let it grow all weekend long and I'll come in scruffed up Monday. Is that cool?
If we win, though, you know what's going to happen. Everybody that's watching this now is going to say, Thom, you got to keep the beard going.
That's fine. I got no problem with that.
Okay.
I got no problem with that at all. My wife would be cool with that.
go.
And no problems, no issues whatsoever. She doesn't like me much anyway. So, hell, what's the difference if I have a beard or don't have a beard? It's safe to say that yours truly a little slow out of the gate. But it's like in the distance when you're on the prairie and you're somewhere out in Montana. And all of a sudden you hear this rumbling starting. And you're wondering what you're, or say, you know, better yet, you're in Colorado because that's a louder rumble. And all of a sudden you're wondering what's going on and you turn around and you see this dust and this dirt up in the air in the distance. And here come these buffaloes in mass, storming, straight ahead, power, speed. That's where I am in this picking. Started slow, but I'm like that herd of buffalo that you can hear and you can see and you can sense and you can feel down the road coming to get you. And I'm coming to get Casey and Brandon.
No. It's just I have a personality that goes into a lot of places. That's why you can get Outlaw, Josie Wales, Phil Collins, and Mario. But when my audience kind of tunes in, you're going to get some 65-year-old man or some old guy like you and say, oh, I love Outlaw Josie Wales, but I have no clue what Dragon Ball is.
Whoa. Did you just call me an old dude? Some old man? Is that what you just called me, Votch? I mean, I just met you.
No, I said Clint Eastwood's an old man. And he's
no,
like,
you did not, Votch. We could turn back the tape. You say an old man like you is what.
I am not backing out the legend. Thom Brennaman is an old man.
Yeah, all right.
On his
I
birthday.
believe my wife
On
tells
his
me I'm an old
birthday.
man.
On his birthday.
Votch, you're good. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Votch, it's great having you on. Hey, I want to have you come back sometime if you don't mind. I'd love to have you come back and talk about what's going on in Big D because a lot of people coast to coast care about what's happening down there in Dallas.
Sure, let's do it. I am, one of the Cowboy guys that people like, so I'm grateful for that. But I'm also a draft guy. So if y'all got some draft talk in the off season, contact me there. Hit me up. I'll be free.
We will. Votch Lombardi. Thanks so much, my
Appreciate
man. Hope all's well down in Houston. God bless you. Well, that was our buddy Votch Lombardi. He's got lots to talk about these days. If you weren't with us, we've had him on twice. He covers the Dallas Cowboys like nobody else. You heard him. He's got the draft show thing going. Cowboys are playing well. They hung in there without their starting quarterback. Went 4-1 with Cooper Rush. And good enough to earn them that top level of who stinks, who's borderline stinks, who's borderline good, and who's good. They were on the top line.
They were on the top line for good teams. I mean, they thrashed the Bears. If that offense continues to stay on the incline for the Cowboys, they'll be in a good spot. They'll be in a good team for a while. Now, the other thing that was interesting about Votch is his nickname for the Washington Commanders.
Yes.
That I always reference them as the Wizards now. And people think I'm talking about the NBA team. It's very funny. That's one thing I love about Votch. He just does not care one bit what teams are called. He doesn't care about the professionalism part of it. He's a good dude. He's a good dude. Super fan. Love the guy.
All right, let's resend this to Bronson. Okay?
Okay.
So let's have a capital S there. Okay? Let's try that. With after that first word, what do you call that underneath thing?
An underscore.
An underscore.
Underscore, and then the number.
Okay.
And then the rest of it.
Okay.
Because he just sent me a text that for some reason I think I'm the one that – I know I'm the one that screwed this up. Bronson Arroyo, our big interview coming up shortly. Love some of the comments made by the hundreds, thousands of you watching, especially our buddy Sir Boy Wonder. He says the Chatterbox Sports needs to buy the rights to Ohio University athletics. I agree. I agree. And that he said we have to do a live show at Ford Field if, and that's if, Ohio University can win out and get to the title game of the Mid-American Conference. So there you have it. I think it'd be a great deal.
All right, so Tom, here's one for you. How do you respond to ESPN's power rankings having the Browns 23rd yesterday?
Well, look, they're 3-5. Okay,
that would be.
They're 3-5,
Yeah.
so they had not won a game in 5 weeks. Okay, but them being 23rd, bless you, is ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous. I didn't look at some of the other teams that are ahead of them. Most of them we can figure that out. But are the Bengals ranked in front of the Browns?
12th.
The Bengals are ranked 12th in the ESPN power rankings.
Yeah.
Okay. It looks like we have Mr. Arroyo. Is that right?
Yes, we do.
All right. All right. This is a pleasure and an honor. There he is, Bronson Arroyo. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Can't complain.
Where are you? You down in Florida? I know your father, and our thoughts and prayers are with him, your dad, Gus, that he's been going through some tough times physically, and you've been down there taking care of him and keeping an eye on him. How's he doing?
He's doing better. Got him out of the hospital. He's functional in his own house, which is what you're looking for. I mean, being in a hospital or in a facility is just absolutely miserable. It's so sterile, So it was nice to get him back in his own space. And I'm actually back in Cincinnati now. I've got a show on Saturday night here, a tribute show. So we're in town for a little band practice tonight.
What's the show? Where is it? And what's it for?
It's at the Madison Theater. I actually don't know what it's for. I usually say yes to everything without even knowing the details. And I know it's four tribute bands they're playing though. I think it's an REM band, a Green Day band, I think Smashing Pumpkins, and then we're doing a Pearl Jam set last. And it's about 7 to 11 at the Madison Theater in Kentucky. And we'll probably be doing about 10 songs. I think that's what everybody's probably doing.
Cool. Do all the guys in your band, are they guys from Cincinnati, or are they guys from different parts of the country?
In this band, I kind of have two bands. One is these are all Cincinnati guys. These are guys that I started playing with in 2006 when I got traded from the Red Sox, and I just put out that cover album called Covering the Bases, and that was put out by Warner Brothers, and they were asking me if I still wanted to play some music. And so I said, yeah, I would love to. So they put this band together for me. We've been playing ever since.
When you think about I've always wondered this because for those of us that weren't good enough at music, for those of us that weren't good enough to be a Major League Baseball pitcher, I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but I find it an interesting question. Do you get more of the rush and the adrenaline and all of those things when you're up there on a stage and you're playing a huge event out in spring training, just announced a few days ago? I think Eddie Vedder's going to be out there right when spring training gets started, if I'm not mistaken, this coming March or February. Do you get more of all of those things from being on the mound, pitching in a major league game, or being up on the stage?
It used to be I was more nervous on the stage for sure. And part of that is due to the fact that, when you're pitching in a major league arena, most of the time you don't feel like you're pitching for the fans. You feel like you're pitching for yourself and for your teammates, right? You're pitching for the organization, and the fans are kind of a secondary thing, like an outer ring of that. And hopefully they appreciate your performance and that you do well for them as well, but it's not the primary goal. Musically, you feel like people bought a ticket to hear the music. And if you fail them, there's nothing to hide behind. It's like, you feel like they didn't get their money's worth. And so baseball wise, if I got my butt kicked at the stadium, let's say by the Pirates on any given day, I'd feel like I let myself down, I let the team down, but I wouldn't necessarily feel like I let the fans down, because they were there for the entertainment, and it's kind of in sports, it's win, lose, or draw. You don't know what's going to happen. But musically, you don't feel like you should go up on the stage and just bomb it. And so I used to be much more nervous musically, but these days I've played a lot more shows and played with a band, and you get comfortable up there, and you feel like there's really nothing that can go so wrong that people would really notice. So it's been pretty comfortable the last couple of years.
So when you're cruising around and you got the ear pods in and you're listening to music, what are the 2 or 3 bands that you find yourself, and maybe it's not limited to 2 or 3, but if you were limited to 2 or 3 bands that you had to listen to on a regular basis, what bands would they be?
Yeah, if I was on a deserted island and I could only take three bands with me, I think it would definitely be Pearl Jam. It would probably be the Beatles, and then it'd probably be the Lumineers. I find that those 3 bands I could listen to over and over and over again. There's much more music out there that I enjoy, but those never seem to get old. I could play them 24/7 in the background of my life, and they feel like I don't get tired of it.
Let's go to the background of your life a little bit. Talked about your dad, Gus, your mom, Judy. You're born down in the Florida Keys back in February of '77. Your father, correct me if I'm wrong, originally from Cuba. Is that right?
Yeah, my father was born in Cuba in 1950 and migrated to the Keys when his parents decided that they were seeing the handwriting on the wall, that they thought that was when Batista ran the country before Castro took over. And my grandfather actually was kind of in the clique and the crew, which was called the July 26 movement, kind of helping Castro take over the country because they thought he was going to make it a democracy, and he didn't. So they wind up staying in the Keys.
Okay, so you get down the Keys, you're born there, and then you move to a town, Brooksville, Florida, where you go to Hernando High School, and you're a great athlete there. You're playing basketball, you're pitching in baseball, the whole 9 yards. You've got college baseball scholarship offers, that kind of thing. I want to backtrack a second, though. When you do move, what was life like in the Arroyo house on a day-to-day basis? What was it like growing up in Florida?
For the most part, I had a bit of a strange upbringing. We lived on 3.5 acres when we moved from the Keys. We had this property that had these beautiful oak trees with the Spanish moss hanging down. And it was cow fields, basically. You're not living in Florida where you're on the coast. You're not living near the ocean anymore as we were in the Keys. And we always had a weight room in my house. My father was in this culture where he had been lifting weights with his friends for a long time. And this was like serious. They'd come home from work, and these guys they were benching somewhere between 400 and 500 pounds. They were squatting between 600 and 700 pounds, and the same thing on the deadlift. And so he saw me as a kid who could play catch as a 5 and 6 year old in a way that I'd never been taught. And he just saw athleticism that was, above and beyond the average kid. And so he thought, I'll put him in the weight room and make him a little stronger, at least get him a free education in college. So in my house, it was kind of wake up, have a good breakfast, go to school, come home, get a little snack. We'd go down and do our baseball thing, which was playing, stretching, warming up, playing catch, probably throwing a bullpen to a tire that was cemented onto a bucket, taking some ground balls, hitting in a batting cage, and then getting in the weight room and doing 45 minutes to an hour of a workout. Go inside, take a shower, do your homework, eat some dinner, and go to sleep and do it all over again.
I read where, and you talked about the weightlifting thing. I read where, and with the Cuban background, although Castro wasn't in power yet, your dad was one of those guys, and correct me, Bronson, if I'm wrong here, the Russians and the East Germans and all these kinds of guys were doing weightlifting a little bit different than maybe some of the people were doing at that time in the United States, and that's the kind of stuff you were doing. Is that accurate, or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, not so much in the lifts that we were doing, but the dedication to the craft at a young age. You would hear about Russian athletes just being, bred from the time they were 3 and 4 years old, whether they were an Olympic wrestler or if they were, a snatcher or a clean and jerk guy, whatever. You just got them started a little bit earlier. And my father really bought into that philosophy. I can remember many times as a kid being 7 and 8 years old and people walking up to my father and saying, "Oh, we hear that your son's, squatting, 200 pounds at age 6. And they would say, that's going to stunt his growth. You're crazy. I don't think you should be doing these things. And he just was a little bit more ahead of his time. He was taking me to the acupuncturist. He was taking me to the chiropractor. I was getting full body massages as a kid. He treated me like an athlete. And he just saw that was the way that you could achieve anything in life, which was kind of like to put one foot in front of the other and really pay attention to the details. Other people had not really caught up to that yet. And so he looked like a bit of a quack for a while. But as time has gone on, it's proven that he was kind of on the right track and put me in a place that gave me the ability to play, 15 years in the big leagues. Otherwise, it would have never happened.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You have a chance to go to college on a scholarship, play baseball, great basketball player, all those kinds of things. But you get drafted in the 3rd round by the Pirates. I'm assuming you weren't a hard thrower. But I don't know what the importance in the mid-'90s was like as it is now to go draft a hard thrower. Would you be drafted in the 3rd round today with the stuff that you had then compared to what it seems like they're only looking for now?
Probably not. I think it would have taken a very, very special scout, which I feel like the guy who drafted me, his name is Scott Lovecamp. He's still with the Yankees. Working with their pitching, in the entire organization. And I feel like he was special enough to be aware of my feel, of the ability to change arm angles, to change tempos, the wit, the craftiness I had between my ears to beat hitters. At a very young age, I was doing a lot of these things. Most scouts probably wouldn't have leaned on that so heavy and drafted me in the 3rd round these days, because I was throwing, in high school, I was throwing probably 86 to 88. And on a good day, I would touch 90. In my prime, let's say 2006, I was probably throwing, 87 to 92. And most days I was still living in that 86 to 88 range. So I never really was a hard thrower, but I always had the ability to throw my secondary pitches for strikes, right? And when you can do that at age 18, a lot of times you then don't walk a lot of guys in the big league level, right? Command seems to be something that is built into the machine early on, and they're starting to realize that now. But back in 1995, that wasn't so much aware on the table. They thought they could teach everyone everything from the time you were drafted on. And so I think I would have been drafted, but it would have been probably later in the draft. I probably would have had a more of an uphill battle trying to get to the big leagues, throwing under 90 miles an hour most of the time. But I still always feel like the cream rises to the top. You find a way to get it done if you're a winner. And I feel like I could have always competed at the big league level.
All right, so you get in the Pirates organization. You're there working your way up to the big leagues. What do you remember about your major league debut?
Oh man, I remember a lot. It was, first I remember I was in Colorado Springs. Our manager at the time in AAA was Trent Jewett. He had got sent up in mid-season from being a AAA manager to the big leagues to coach third base. The Pirates had fired the first and third base coach, and so the hitting coach had actually taken over the manager's job there in AAA. We're playing in Colorado Springs. And he calls me into the office and he says, I got 2 things. I got one bad news and I got some good news. Which one you want first? And I said, I'll take the bad news. He said, the bad news is you're not pitching today. And this was Richie Hebner, legendary Pirates player.
Yeah.
And and kind of a guy who could be irritated very easily, right? He was always on edge. He loved me, but it's what we call in the game a red ass, right? A guy who can be, you didn't say one thing and he's pissed off. So, I wasn't sure what I was getting from him. He said the bad news is you're not pitching today. He said the good news is you're going to pitch on against the Braves on Wednesday. And so it was, that was the realization of that moment, all those childhood days in the weight room that was coming to fruition. And so I get to Pittsburgh. I remember it was a rainy day. There was no batting practice. I walked into the stadium having no idea that you weren't supposed to wear a suit to home games. And I walked in with my one cheap suit I had, and guys got a kick out of that and were kind of laughing at me as I walked in. And I remember sitting on the bench that very first day. Actually, pregame, I was getting dressed and I was putting on some spikes. And a friend of mine, Jimmy Anderson, who I'd played with in the minor leagues a lot, he said, "What are you doing putting on those spikes?" And I said, I've been pinch hitting, pinch running in AAA a lot. So I'm always used to putting them on. And he said, "Man, ain't nobody going to pinch hit in the big leagues here." He said, "Put your tennis shoes on and man, enjoy yourself." So we get out to the bench. I'm sitting there in Three Rivers Stadium, right? I haven't been in a big league ballpark like that, especially where you couldn't see out the back of the stadium. All minor league ballparks, you can see out into the back. But just having those seats there changed the landscape. The AstroTurf was different. You felt like you were in a different place. I'm looking across the field. I see Greg Maddux. I see John Smoltz. I see Thom Glavine. I'm seeing these guys that were absolute idols of mine as a kid. And I'm just enjoying the game. And in the third inning, I hear, "Arroyo." And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "We want you to hit." And I said, "I've got tennis shoes on." And they said, "Don't worry about it. It's good dirt in there. We need you to pinch hit." So I'm literally find myself on the on-deck circle with no contacts in my eyes, half blurry vision, with a pair of tennis shoes on, about to make my major league debut as a hitter.
You got to be kidding me. You don't have contacts in? These guys are throwing 90 miles an hour. I mean, the tennis shoes, okay, but you got no contacts in?
Yeah, I had no contacts in. My eyes since high school had been like 20, 25, 20, 30, so you could get away with normal life not wearing them. But on the field, it was very difficult to be really good without those contacts in. So it was doable, but it was hazy for sure. And I got up there against a guy, luckily I knew well, named Bruce Chin. We had played against each other in the minor leagues for a long time. He was with the Atlanta Braves all those years, and he wasn't a hard thrower, and I kind of knew his repertoire. So it made me feel comfortable enough, but still making your major league debut, kind of sliding around on the dirt in some tennis shoes without being able to see the ball crystal clear was a bit odd.
All right, what about the first game now, though, you get a chance to pitch in?
So the next night I get a chance to pitch in. I don't remember a ton about the game. I can remember the feeling of the game. I know I got a no decision. I think I went 5 innings, gave it 4 runs if I remember correctly. But it was an uncomfortable feeling. It was, I'd been pitching in the minor leagues for a long time, very loose, very free and easy, pitching off the top of my head, pitching backwards, just really playing a chess match with hitters. And I get to the big league level, and the Pirates, they kind of took that away from me. They were kind of like, "Hey, Jason Kendall is an all-star. He's been here for a few years. Why don't you just go with what he wants you to throw?" And they really didn't want me to shake him off a whole lot. And it was also something people don't realize, the subtleties of what it's like to be comfortable out on the field. I'm pitching on a mound that I had never been on. I'm inside a stadium now that feels a little different. I'm wearing a uniform that's much tighter than I'm used to. I'm at the big league level, and they give me a uniform that's more snug in the pants. I'm used to wearing this very baggy, kind of hand-me-down uniform from years and years in AAA that feels almost like a pair of pajamas, and you're very comfortable. And so there's these subtleties that you don't realize can bother you out there. And, I felt like I was in a straitjacket, kind of throwing uphill into the wind the whole night. You couldn't really get on the hitters. You didn't feel like you could finish people. And by the end of that night, I kind of knew I was in a different place, and I knew it was going to take some time to get comfortable.
You're there a couple of years, and then you eventually get claimed on waivers by the Boston Red Sox. Before we get to the Red Sox, as a very young man, and I love picking brains of guys where this has happened to. I mean, the game's littered with guys who number 1 picks, and everything just kind of falls into place. When you get claimed on waivers, or the team that drafted you puts you on waivers, do you start wondering if you got it to make it, or did you never lose that confidence?
At that time, I had never lost the confidence up to that point. Had it happened a second time with the Boston Red Sox, and I would have kind of like lingered in AAA and gotten claimed off waivers a second time, I think some of that doubt would have crept in. But what I had observed in the 8 years that I was with the Pirates was that, I was a winner at the minor leagues. I had like 80 wins. I think I have 84 to this day, but at that time I probably had close to 80 wins in the minor leagues. I was 40 games over 500. I knew I was out pitching guys who were drafted higher than me that were, maybe top prospects in the organization where I wasn't valued in the same way because I wasn't a hard thrower. But everybody, when you're inside a locker room, you can't fake it, right? People know who the real deal is. They know who guys who can muster it up in those, in those tough times when you got second and third and nobody out, the guys who take care of their body, the guys that work hard in the weight room, the guys that aren't lazy, right? That their word means something. All these things kind of permeate your character in the game. And I was a guy who I knew people inside of the room I was in could feel that I was here, I was serious, and that I wasn't going anywhere. And so when the Pirates let me go, I was a little surprised for sure because I had so much success at the minor league level. I thought I was knocking on the door of being in that rotation for a long time. And, they just didn't quite at the big league level see my value that everyone else had seen at the minor leagues. And so they let me go on waivers, and I got to the Red Sox. I wasn't really sure what I was going to get, but I quickly realized that every organization functioned very differently. And at that time, I hadn't even thought about the fact that I wasn't going to play in the big leagues for a decade. I mean, it just wasn't on my radar at all.
So you get to Boston in 2004. You're in middle relief to start. You work your way into the rotation. You've been asked about this a ton of times, and about when you hit Alex Rodriguez of the Yankees in July of that year. I don't know where the Red Sox were that year. The rivalry, whether teams are good or bad or both, or one's good, the other one's bad, it doesn't matter. It's such a heated rivalry. But was that moment, not that you planned to hit Alex Rodriguez, but did that moment become almost a galvanizing type of moment for that Boston Red Sox team?
Yeah, people credit that with kind of like, launching of the awakening of the Red Sox to coming back and being down 3-0 in that series and winning that World Series. And people really point at that. And, it felt galvanizing at the time, but, we wouldn't have had to fight those guys to feel like we were galvanized. I think just Alex purely coming to that team, if you know a bit of history kind of the Billy Beane story and where Alex came from, he wanted to be a Red Sox and the union wouldn't really allow it because they were going to have to take some money off the table in his contract. So he wound up being a Yankee kind of as a second choice. And, we had been battling those guys since 2003. Aaron Boone hits the home run in Game 7, and I'm warming up in the bullpen that year and really devastated us. We were up 5 games. We were up 5-1 with 5 outs left to go in the game with Pedro Martinez on the mound. And so this thing has really been building for a while. And then you infuse Alex into that lineup, an already great team. It just the guy who Alex was, who could kind of rub people the wrong way over his career with a bit of cockiness and brashness and how good he was, it just left turned the fire up even more in 2004. And so when I hit him that day, and him and Jason Varitek go at it, Varitek was the captain of that ball club in every sense of the word. And for those two giants to kind of go at it, it definitely galvanized that team. I can remember being in the clubhouse after winning that game when Bill Miller hits a home run on Mariano Rivera and kind of brings us back from the dead there. And Theo Epstein was in the locker room. All the guys who had been kicked out of the game were in the locker room. And people were celebrating almost like we won a playoff game. And from then on, things started turning in our direction. So it was it definitely felt like it was something.
Well, it really turned in your direction, and I'm not sure, maybe you're not even able to do it. You're an eloquent guy, but I don't know. But you had been around there long enough, only a couple of years, to know the whole vibe of Red Sox baseball. Look, I had a chance to broadcast Major League Baseball for over 30 years, and it wasn't until I had a few days off during the season back in 07, 08, 09, something like that, and my wife and I went up to Maine for a few days, and we're there, and I mean starting at 6 o'clock, man, in Maine. This isn't in Boston. This is in Maine. Everybody and his brother is locked into watching the Boston Red Sox on some random night in June or July or August, whatever it is. Is there any way to put into words what that season culminating in finally winning the World Series, what that was like to be in Boston that summer?
Yeah, I've often tried to tell stories that can make even other players understand, because even when I came to Cincinnati and any place I played afterwards, people would always ask me, even veteran guys of the game, they would say, is it really that much different to play in New England? And from my experience, it absolutely was. And, I can remember being in the playoffs before we went to the World Series. I was probably, I would say I was the 15th most popular guy on that team, right? I mean, you had Johnny Damon, you had Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz, Derek Lowe, Tim Wakefield. These guys, Tim Wakefield wins 200 games. Derek Lowe wins 175. I'm still the last man on the totem pole behind Pedro Schilling and these guys. And I won 148 plus 84 in the minor leagues, and they totally outshined my career. So I felt like the water boy a lot of times on that team. And I could go anywhere in New England. And I mean anywhere. I could go to a truck stop in northern Vermont, and people would come up to you absolutely freaking out, wanting to take a picture with you and shaking while they were taking a picture with you. This is going to the hospital and having the nurse not be able to draw your blood. And she says to you, the last time this happened to me, I couldn't get the needle in someone's arm. It was Bruce Springsteen, right? Like stuff like that. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be Pedro Martinez or Johnny Damon at that time. And so, the couple of things that I like to say about after we won the World Series was, first of all, the cemeteries were full the next day. People were going to the gravestones of their parents and their grandparents and reading newspaper articles to them. That's how much it meant to that city. And the other thing was that nobody ever would come up to me and say, congratulations, you guys won the World Series. They would say, thank you. Thank you for my family. Thank you for bringing a peace of mind to the people who are alive and the people that are dead. And it was very profound. I felt the love from there. And it was part of the reason why I was so heartbroken to be traded to the Cincinnati Reds at the time, because I felt the passion in the people in New England. And I hadn't felt that anywhere else in the game.
All right, so let's skip ahead to that. The next year you have your best year. You win 14 games. You pitch over 200 innings for the first time. You've got it going on. You sign this 3-year contract to stay in Boston. You've said yourself it was a quote-unquote hometown discount for all the reasons that you're talking about right now. And then all of a sudden you find out you're getting traded to Cincinnati. What did you think when you heard? Where were you when you were told that? And what went through your mind, not only sitting there hearing it, but then maybe when you got in your car to drive away or just spend time alone thinking about how did this just happen?
Yeah, it was a very odd day that's very, very vivid in my mind. It was nearing the end of spring training, and I was feeling good about where I was at. I had a couple of good outings and a couple of mediocre ones in spring, but I knew I was cemented on the club at that time. I had already established myself as a major league player. And so I wasn't worried about, my performances so much. It was about trying to get healthy and making sure that you were strong enough to start the season and not be hurt. And so I was pitching against the Orioles that day. I remember I had a buddy named Joe Maston in town. His sister was there. We were having some lunch afterwards under this big tent right outside the stadium. And I'd finished that covering the bases record, and there was this part in the song Everlong by the Foo Fighters that you couldn't really understand what Dave Grohl was mumbling in the background. And so we had Stephen King, the writer, the legendary writer, listen to the record and ask him if he would do a spoken word part and write a part for it. And he said, let me listen to the record, and if I think it's good music, I'll do it. And so he said he signed on for it. And so he had done this part, and we had never met in person. We had talked on the phone, and Stephen walked by, and he shook my hand, and we had a great conversation that day. And I remember I left the ballpark just on a high. I had a good outing. The season's about to start, and I was headed back to my hometown of Brooksville. I'm driving 3 hours from Fort Myers up to my house, and I'm thinking about what I need for the season. I'm going to pack my stuff. I'm going to get it loaded, and we're heading to Boston here to start the season. And I'm at my house, and I was talking with one of my childhood buddies on the phone, and Theo Epstein clicked in on the second line. And I saw his name, and on the drive up, I had somebody who had called me and said, hey, there's whispers in the air that you might be traded for a guy named Willie Mopena. But I had been in those type of conversations for such a long time, I never took them seriously, right? I just signed an undervalued deal for 3 years. I think Boston loves me. I'm the youngest guy in the rotation. I gave him the most quality starts the year before. It's like, it didn't make sense to me. And sure enough, Theo clicks over and he says, I say, hello? And he says, hey, Bronson. He said, I got something I don't really want to tell you. And I said, you traded me for Willie Mopena? And he said, yeah. And it was a super short conversation. And I said, okay, I'll see you at the ballpark tomorrow. And I hung up because I was so agitated. I felt like I had it was the first time in my life that I felt a bit of betrayal, because when I signed that deal, Theo was not there at the time. He had left the organization for a bit, and I was dealing with Jed Hoyer and Ben Sherrington as co-general managers of the club, and they assured me that I was not going to be traded, or that there was no plans to trade me anytime soon. And so it'd only been 4 or 5 weeks since I'd signed that deal, and I was really just heartbroken by it.
Okay, so you go to Cincinnati. This is a team that had been really down, and to be honest, maybe you totally disagree. I just thought the whole vibe in the clubhouse, because I came shortly thereafter, and I just, to me, it looked like a lazy clubhouse. I'm not asking you to say that. It lacked intensity, it lacked fire, and here you had left the place that had all of those things. When you come to the Reds, right out of the gate, your first year, you go to the All-Star game. You throw over 240 innings that year. What was different? Was anything different about Bronson Arroyo as a pitcher, as a man, during that first season with Cincinnati?
Yeah, being battle tested in the American League East, pitching on such a large stage all the time, not only in the playoffs against the Yankees and against St. Louis in the World Series, but from 2003, from being in that playoff series against the Yankees there. We had a grind of a series against Oakland in the first round in 2003 that we barely escaped, with Derek Lowe closing that game out there on that front.
I did that game. I did that game for Fox. I remember it well.
Yeah. And, those couple of years really made me feel like I was playing on another level. It made you know that you could play at the highest level, get comfortable, and get the job done. And so when I get traded over to Cincinnati, I don't know much about the National League, but I do know at the time, but I do know that I've got the 9-hole hitter is now going to be a pitcher. I don't think the lineups are as strong as the American League East. And I'm coming off of, pitching in places that made me feel like, this is as good as it's ever going to get. Plus, physically, I was 27, 28 years old. It was right in my prime. I had figured out my repertoire of pitches. I was throwing a bit harder than I probably had ever had in my career. I could get up to 90, 91, 92 if I needed to, a little more often. And, I just got off to a good start. The city embraced me a bit. I could tell that there was a lack of fire around the place. I could feel it in the city, but you saw people coming alive. I can remember one time I was at a place called Jillian's that doesn't exist anymore here in Cincinnati, and I was at a urinal, and there was a guy next to me, and I had pitched about 3 or 4 times, and there was a guy next to me looking at the bathroom attendant, and he was saying like, "Hey, this kid Arroyo is amazing, man. He's lighting a fire in the city," not knowing I was standing right next to him. At the urinal next to him, and you could feel that around town a little bit, that something was changing a little bit, and I wasn't totally aware of it, but I did feel like I was kind of skating downhill. It was one of those times when you caught a streak in your career where you felt unbeatable for a while. And, it wasn't a lot different about me. It was mostly between my ears and the confidence levels that I had to be pitching at the big league level at that time.
But Bronson, it had to feel like, and again, I'm saying this, not you, but it had to feel like, and maybe I'm totally wrong, it had to feel like after you walk out of Boston and you come to Cincinnati, it's like you've gone from the big leagues to the minor leagues at that point in time, at least as far as fandom is concerned, as far as passion, as far as the level of the team, the expectations of the team. There had to be, maybe I'm wrong, there had to be some kind of letdown there besides the betrayal part you talked about. But I'm talking about physically putting on a major league uniform in Cincinnati compared to what you were putting on just months before in Boston.
Absolutely. There was. I mean, and I can tell you subtle things that people, might not realize. But when I first walked into the Reds locker room and realized that they didn't have any breakfast, any food, they didn't have a kitchen, we didn't have a chef, we didn't have a masseuse, right? You didn't have an acupuncturist, right? There was a lot of amenities that we had in Boston in a time when a lot of teams didn't have that we were lacking in Cincinnati. I remember that very first day I walked into the locker room, there was no one in there except for Aaron Harang, Kent Merker, and Ken Griffey Jr. And everybody came over to say hi to me. I remember when I walked in the door, Kent Merker screamed out, "Our karaoke team just got a little bit better." and Ken Griffey came over and said hi, and their beat writers were there. And I really didn't know Aaron Harang much. We pitched against each other the year before, but he was young in his career, and I wasn't paying attention to the National League much. And so I realized he was the number one on this staff. But I walked into Jerry Naren's office as the manager, and he had been with the Red Sox just a couple of years earlier with me. And so I sat down and he said, Bronson, I know you're disappointed to be here. He said, I'm disappointed to be here. And because he had known where we had come from. And so, I realized that there were some changes here. The ballpark wasn't as nice in Sarasota. That it needed an update, right? Everything felt like it needed an update. But there was one guy on the staff, the strength coach, Matt Krause, that I had been with for many years in the minor leagues. And I did not know he was the big league strength coach until the day I walked in there. And he made me feel very comfortable. He made me feel at home. He made me feel like the program that I was bringing from the Red Sox, I could continue with that, and they weren't going to change me too much. And that comfort level just coming from him made it that much easier to kind of get in that uniform and kind of push away some of that petty stuff and just see if we could win ball games.
Slowly but surely, roster starts to turn over. You start bringing in some guys that look like they have a chance to be really good, headlined, of course, by Joey Votto. Jay Bruce comes along, and now you get to 2010. And there's certainly a vibe about the team that feels like this team can win. That night when Jay Bruce hits the home run to send the Reds into the postseason for the first time in seemingly forever, I know it wasn't a sellout crowd that night, but it was a great crowd that night. It may not be on par necessarily, certainly not on par with winning a World Series playing in Boston, but that had to be one really cool moment for you and a bunch of guys that you sort of saw come together over a number of years after you arrived.
Absolutely. When I got there in 06, like you said, there was a different landscape there, right? We had Rich Aurelia playing shortstop and third base as a utility guy. We had Scott Hatterberg at first base. Ryan Friel was on the club. You still had Ken Griffey Jr. Your starting catcher was supposed to be Jason LaRue, who got hurt, and David Ross kind of took over that role with me at the same time. But it was a totally different ball club than we had in 2010. And the old guard was there, and what you talked about with a little bit of a lack of intensity. And I would say that was kind of Adam Dunn and Ken Griffey Jr.'s team at the time. And those guys, I felt like, were used to having a good offense and terrible pitching, and they knew they probably weren't going to make the playoffs. And there was this feeling in the locker room of kind of like go along to get along, and we'll come in fourth place and we'll do it again next year, and we'll do the best we can. But maybe we're not going anywhere. And by the time, kind of that team slowly started to disintegrate because they were of age and because of a few trades, and you started hearing in the pipeline about this guy named Johnny Cueto. People are still talking about Homer Bailey, but they're saying, hey, we got a guy named Cueto. He's even better, right? And then we get Mike Leake, and you're hearing Joey Votto and Jay Bruce, and there's this buzz coming in the minor leagues that I hadn't heard in my Pirate days really ever, of this group of guys that's coming in that we think is going to be pretty good. And then you infuse Dusty Baker in there as a manager who really can kind of make you feel like he's the commander of this ship and he's going to make it go. And so by 2010, when Jay hits that home run, it felt like a different team. It felt like a different space. It felt like we were ready to take off and do something special in the game.
During that postseason, you get no hit in the first game by the late Roy Halladay. You pitch great in your start, but the team gets swept, and on you go. 11 was a disappointment, but now 2012 comes along. I thought, you tell me if you agree or disagree, I thought that Reds team was the best team in the National League that year. Before we get to the playoffs, did you think going into the playoffs that this was a team, you had played on a World Series champion already, did you think this was a team built to win the whole thing?
It's hard to say that sometimes because you're not ever inside other teams' locker rooms and you don't really know exactly how gritty they are, right? You can only observe that from the outside. But from observing our team from the inside, I felt like we had a team that was really close to winning a World Series at the time. I felt like the pitching staff probably lacked that real true number one guy at the time. And I also felt like we had a lineup that was a little bit too much swing and miss. And we could get really hot at times. But what I had observed in Boston was the way that we won those games was because of guys like Bill Miller, who I knew could put the ball in play against the best closer in the game, right? And in Cincinnati, it felt like that was the best team we'd had. And I thought we had a chance to win the World Series. But if I was being honest about exactly, betting my life on something, I felt like we were missing just a pinch of something, right? And it didn't mean that we couldn't do it, because we could have. but I felt like it would have been solidified had we had one guy maybe playing in the outfield who hit 320 every year that you knew could put the ball in play, that was a little harder to strike out. Because if you think about that lineup, you got Jay Bruce, who can be super hot, swing and miss. You got Drew Stubbs in center field, same thing, right? You've got Brandon Phillips and Joey Votto on the right side of the field, and those are the grinders we're talking about. And, you know, behind the plate's kind of the same thing. You know, you've got guys who can make it happen at times, but it's a little bit this up and down, and you want to see something a little bit more flatlined. And I also felt like, honestly, myself, I had no business, you know, I don't have any business going up against Clayton Kershaw or Justin Verlander head-to-head in a World Series game. Like, those guys are probably going to beat me more times than I beat them. Although we could get it done, Johnny Cueto wasn't quite that ace yet, right? So I felt like there was just a pinch of something missing, but you were hoping that we had enough.
You get to the postseason, and look, you get bad luck right out of the gate. I mean, the first inning of the game, Cueto's hurt. He was a number one guy. You come out, pitch a great game, 7 shutout innings in game 2. You're ahead 2-0, win both games in San Francisco. You come back to Cincinnati. You come back to Cincinnati, a place where the team had not lost 3 games in a row at home all year long. All you got to do is win 1, best of 5. I remember, because we couldn't televise, I remember sitting up in the booth, and I'll never forget just the picture in my mind of looking down at the Giants dugout and seeing these guys jumping around. And Hunter Pence has got this huddle thing going on. I mean, you know, look, they're a team in desperation. They got nothing to lose. When you're on the other side, I don't know if you saw that or if you thought, good Lord, what the hell are those guys doing over there? It's amateur hour. It looks like a college team, blah, blah, blah. Do you remember seeing it? What did you think about it? Because that started game 3, if I remember right, in that Giants dugout.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we all, not everyone, but we either heard about it or you got to see a little bit of it. And, you know, we knew Hunter from playing with the Astros, you know, played against him since he was a rookie. We knew he had big-time talent, you know, kind of an unorthodox player. But he didn't really emerge as a personality on that club for those first few years. And by the time he gets over to San Francisco, he's now, you know, wearing his hair a little bit differently, right? He's a guy who everyone knows wears his pants up to his knees, right? And he's this old school gritty guy who plays hard, and he knows how to get the job done. And he had then blossomed in the game as a voice in that locker room. And guys like Buster Posey were great players, but they didn't have that same personality to bring people together. And so, you know, with him doing that at the time, I mean, I don't think we thought much of it. I mean, we felt like we're back home. We've got 3 games. We just need to win one of these. You know, if you remember in that rotation, you know, Zito was kind of on the tail end of his career. He wasn't the same guy he was before. We didn't feel like they had anybody in that rotation. Even Bumgarner at the time, I had just beat him 7-0 or 9-0, whatever it was, and we didn't fear him at that time. He didn't really take off to be the Madison Bumgarner that we know now until the next year. And so, you know, I don't think there was no panic on our part. And part of that led us to start Mike Leake in that series because Johnny Cueto went out instead of going with myself on 3 days rest and Matt Latos on 3 days rest. And that is the one thing about that series that still sticks in my side to this day, that I really wished we would have had the opportunity to not have Mike in the rotation because I didn't think he was ready that year.
And you were close with Mike Leake, so it's not like you're sitting here taking some shot at some guy. I mean, he basically became your little brother from a second he went right from being drafted at Arizona State to pitching in the big leagues.
Absolutely. I took him under my wing. You know, I did everything I could to make him feel comfortable in that locker room. I love him to this day. You know, he's one of my favorite guys I've ever played with. He's quirky and he's different, and, you know, I like everything about him. But he just wasn't quite ready for that big stage yet in my mind. Not to say that he couldn't have got the job done, but I felt like we had a better chance with myself and Latos going on 3 days rest in those moments. And I had that conversation with Brian Price. And I remember because Johnny got hurt swinging the bat before game 1. I was taking batting practice with Johnny on the field, and he said to me in Spanish, he said in Spanish, "I'm going to swing hard like this tonight, papi." And he said, "I'm going to swing duro." And he hit the first 3 balls of our batting practice really hard line drives to shortstop. And he winced. And he said, "Oh." And he didn't say, "I have a problem," but I know what happened. And he pulled an oblique. And when I went in the locker room and he was getting prepped for the game, I knew he was in trouble. And I knew he probably wasn't going to make it through the game. But when we got back to Cincinnati, they pulled him off the playoff roster without allowing him to play catch. He went in the weight room and they did a couple of things with him where he was testing it, and he said he felt pretty good, and they never allowed him to play long toss or play catch to see if he could still stay in on the roster, and they pulled him off of it. So when they pulled him off of it, I was disappointed by that, first of all, because I thought they should have given him a chance to play catch. But then I had a conversation with Brian Price, and I said, why don't you go 3 days rest with myself and Matt Latos? And he said, I don't think it's time to panic. He said, we're going to go with what we have done all year, and we're going to put Mike in the rotation. And I just felt like at the time that Mike did not quite have the confidence in his game to step on that stage and really get the job done. Now, the years after that, I would have taken Mike Leake all day. But at that time, I felt like he was just, underneath that.
I have often, just sitting back and watching through 30 years of good teams, bad teams, with the Cubs, the Diamondbacks, the Reds, been around to broadcast a team that won a World Series, and a lot of crappy teams along the way here or there. I still maintain, and you just pointed out with Hunter Pence, I still maintain it's very important to have a guy who's not afraid to step out of these lines we create in baseball, unlike football and basketball, that can step out and be a vocal leader. I felt like that 2012 team lacked that guy. You agree with that or disagree?
Yeah, I totally do. It's, if of anybody who probably, threw a team party or made some of these undercurrent things go on that team, it was usually myself, right? I was the guy who was doing a lot of these things inside the Reds locker room, but it's very difficult to have a non-position player be the guy who's supposed to be the voice in a locker room, right? You need the guy who's playing shortstop every day. You need the guy who's playing center field every day. And on that club, what you needed was Joey Votto to be the voice of that team, or Scott Rowland, right? And both of those guys were great players, and they were great teammates. But they weren't that vocal guy. They weren't that Johnny Gomes personality, right? They weren't that Ryan Dempster. They didn't have, they weren't Pedro Martinez or the Kevin Millar, the guys who really stir the locker room. That Hunter Pence who just can be funny, can be witty, can also be harsh on teammates at times of need, right? And we did lack that a little bit. And when Ryan Ludwig got to that team from the St. Louis Cardinals, he said to me one day on the bench, I'll never forget this. I said, what do you think, Ryan? You've been watching us for about a month now. We weren't playing well. And he said, I don't know how to explain it, but on the St. Louis Cardinals, it always felt like we had a hard stare. And he said, here in Cincinnati, it always feels a little lackadaisical. And that's what it always felt like in that locker room. Like we had a good team, but you were missing this one guy who was a spark plug to say, like, no, guys, we are going to be here, right? And we are going to be here for the long haul. It always felt like we needed somebody a little bit more vocal from a position player.
When you talk about the Cardinals, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, they had some great leaders, some young guys that were coming up at the time, especially the Yadier Molinas of the world and those kind of guys. But I think a lot of that started with their manager, in Tony La Russa. He was a hard stare guy, whether it was midnight or whether it was, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'd walk in his office all the years that I'd do Fox games and say, how you doing? And he'd look you in the eye. He says, I'll tell you in about 6 hours. And he wasn't being flippant about it. He was ready to go for the game that night, whether it was July or in the postseason. I always felt like Frazier, Bronson could have been that guy. But I felt like, and again, I could be totally off base, but just kind of observing, I felt like Frazier was ready to be that guy, but I thought there were some other guys, position players on that team, that didn't want him to be that guy. Is that a stretch?
Well, if we're talking about 2012, you still got
Rowland, but Frazier had played very well that year. And to this day, There's still a lot of debate. And look, you can't fault Dusty Baker. Scott Rowland. I get it. But, I mean, right. Frazier was a big part of that team in helping it get to where it was. So whether it was 2012 or in subsequent years maybe is a better question. I felt like Frazier could have been that guy, but there were people around there, whoever it might be, and we don't have to sit here and name names, but I just felt like that there were people that didn't want him to be that guy.
Yeah, I could see that. When Scott was there in 12, Frazier was playing kind of a He's playing a role where he's not playing every single day. He's playing off the bench. He's not an everyday player. And so when you're not an everyday player, it's very hard to be the guy who's leading the charge, right? If you're talking about years after that, I would agree with you. I think Frazier probably had the personality to do it, but inside of Frazier's personality is a lot of goofiness, right? He loves to be a jokester. And usually a guy on that team can be a jokester, but I could see where from the outside looking in, there might be some people who were a little bit leery of Todd in a way that maybe he joked around too much, right? Maybe he's not the guy to like fly the ship. He's like a good secondary guy, but he's not really the captain, right? And part of that I just think was his personality and the way that he went about his business. And like I said, in 12, when you had Scott there, he hadn't permeated that lineup enough yet to really be the guy to kind of pull the train.
You move on to the Diamondbacks. You sign as a free agent in 2013, and subsequently you start to go through some injuries and things like that. When a Major League Baseball player is injured, the easiest thing in the world for fans to do is sit around and, they're paying this guy all that money. You know what I'm saying here, right? But when you're that guy, is there a feeling of just incredible isolation? You're not always traveling with a team. You're not always feeling comfortable maybe when you come in the clubhouse because everybody's kind of looking at you, or you think people are looking at you and saying, oh, God, we're paying all this guy all this money and he can't play. Does that happen to a player?
Absolutely. I've probably had the least amount of insecurities, at least in the latter part of my career, of anybody who ever walked in a Major League uniform. I was very confident in what I brought to the table and who I was as a person and the value that I felt other people appreciated from me, and even then it was the first time in my career that I wasn't traveling with the ball club. To sit at home and watch your team be in San Francisco. I had gone from 1995 to 2014 without missing a game. I had started over 450 games in a row, if you count the minor leagues, and some bullpen time in there. And I had never been on the disabled list, right? It was not in my DNA to not be with the club. And so just merely not to be traveling on the road was eating me up inside for a while, And then, like you said, let's say you're a younger guy who had some more insecurities, who wasn't as confident, hadn't built a bulk of a career that I had already done in Cincinnati. Sometimes, you walk past the general manager or the owner who had just, signed on the dotted line to pay you all this money. There's no doubt that guys would want to walk the other direction, put their head down in shame. Luckily for me, I had already been 19 and a half seasons, and I knew what I had done every fifth day for such a long time, had built an idea of who Bronson Arroyo was, that I didn't have to hide my head in that way, But even then, I remember being on the treadmill with the owner of the Diamondbacks, and he said, Bronson, when are you going to be back? I need you back out on the field. And he was kind of applying a little bit of pressure to me. And this was probably 3 months after I'd had Tommy John. So I wasn't nowhere near getting out on the field, and I was already 38 years old. And I felt some sort of obligation to the organization, I just signed $23 million for 2 years, and I'd given them 7 wins, and I was leading the team after 14 starts. And I went out there 8 times with a tear in my shoulder and no ligament in my Tommy John, and they were trying to pull me out of the game. And I said, listen, I signed on the dotted line to pitch for you guys. I'm going to ride it till the very end. And I did. But, after having those surgeries, I still felt very indebted to the organization that I wasn't giving them their money's worth.
You get a chance to come back. You finish up with the Reds. And before we get to the big news from last week about your election to the Reds Hall of Fame, you made it cool. And I know that's a word it's used all the time. And, is this guy cool, that guy cool? You're just a cool guy. And you made it cool to be a Red. I've often wondered, you're not one of those guys who's putting on this facade for other people, but in a much more limited role, in my case, in my job, I found it hard sometimes to always be on, if you know what I'm saying, okay? And what I mean by that, you go to dinner. You go to a town where you got some friends there that you haven't seen in a while, and you're excited to catch up with them. And yes, they're friends, but maybe you got in at 2 a.m. the night before on a trip, and the next day you got to be on. Was it ever hard to be on as much as people probably expected you to be?
No, not for me. I mean, I could see other guys getting just totally ground down in life by whether it was going to a restaurant and people wanted to talk to you. You know, I remember playing in Boston, and one of the reasons David Wells didn't want to be there is because he said, man, I've been a Yankee for a long time. And he said, this is insanity here in New England. I walk into a restaurant, he said, sometimes the whole place stands up and cheers, and sometimes they all look at me like I'm the devil because I got beat yesterday, right? And, you know, that type of pressure, you know, could drive some guys out of town or out of the game sometimes. But for me personally, you know, I had been in that weight room since I was a little kid with my father and been thinking about these things. And I also was somehow in my very young youth, I mean, this is 7 and 8 years old. I can remember my mother would be playing tennis in the Keys, and I would go with her, and I would hit a tennis ball against the wall for an hour, you know, but I'd be tired of it. And maybe I would observe, you know, an 80-year-old lady sitting on a bench in the park, and I would go sit next to her, and I would coax a conversation out of her. And I always had this sense that when I left that interaction, that she had a good time because I was asking her questions about her life and she was telling me these stories, and she was also making me feel good in that moment. I figured that out at a really young age. And so for me to be out there and have to be on means that I'm like interacting with fans at a bar or at a restaurant or at the stadium or my teammates and having to pull the load for them. But I always observed that people didn't want to pull the load for someone else. They were a little selfish in that way. And for whatever reason, I just popped out of the box thinking the opposite way. And I always loved being on, being out, interacting with fans in a way that a college kid could walk away from me and say, man, that guy just talked to me like he's known me my whole life. And I saw so many players blow people off that I purposely went in the other direction even harder, even though I was already made that way since I was a kid. And so for me, it was easy, and it still is easy to just deliver the goods to people, to do what you say you're going to do, to bring some energy to a conversation and let people suck off that energy, because I just know life is hard and you see it everywhere. You know, people have problems with anxiety and depression, and all those things still happen in big league locker rooms, even though these are young guys who have great families and are making a lot of money. But, you know, it can be hard at times, and I just didn't have a hard time with it. So I just enjoyed kind of giving that love out to the world.
All right, last two questions. Tell me one thing about Bronson Arroyo that perhaps through the years you've seen a pattern where people think that Bronson Arroyo is X, fill in the blank, and he's nowhere close to being X.
The one thing that permeated my whole career was that they thought I was a partier, right? And I remember we were in Arizona. I was out with Ryan Ludwig at my favorite bar in the whole city, right next to the hotel there. It was you just walk past the steakhouse.
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Nice little quiet spot. And we got back in my room that night, and he said, Bronson, I told my wife that I wish I would have hung with you more this year. This was like late August. And she said, why would you want to hang with Bronson? He seems like a partier. And he said, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. The couple times I've been out with him, he's having a good time, but he's drinking water most of the time, and he has 1 or 2 beers. And he's totally in control, you know, like you think this guy's like out there, you know, out of control, chasing women and drinking a lot, and he's not, right? And what people got wrong about me was that I love humans. I love interacting with people. I love giving that love and that conversation that I can have with people at a bar, drop my guard and be myself and have 1 Corona and then a bunch of waters because I know I'm going to the ballpark the next day to get a good workout in, right? And so people mistake me being out as being a partier, and it really wasn't the way that I operated.
That's fascinating. And look, that you know, I've already had you more time than I had asked of you already, so I don't want to go into that. But I think that's something that down the road we can get into, because when people think that something like that about you, it's funny because, you know, when you travel with a major league team, I remember being out with some guys who were players back in the days when I'd have a few beers with the players every now and again, and there might have been 1 or 2 of these guys that maybe they were doing some things that they shouldn't have been doing, and I wasn't comfortable being around it, but because you were around it, you're thrown in and you're lumped in. That happens for everybody in life, and I think it's safe to say with a guy like you, it's not a surprise to hear you say, because I saw you. You weren't out there partying in the whole 9 yards, but people think he's got the long hair, he's single, he's in a band, he's a music guy, he's all these things. he looks like he might be a partier. And I think that's fantastic. You've had a chance on this show to share that with people because I think that's really important for people to know. Reds Hall of Fame. You get elected, first year up. You tell me, is this like one of the great moments in your professional career?
Absolutely. You know, I'm honestly, you know, I lean a little bit like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, who stood up there the first time they got a Grammy, and he said, I'm going to say something now, and I'm going to say for the whole band, it's typically me. He said, I don't think this means anything. He said, you can't really, you know, judge art. And I kind of lean that way. I'm a bit humble. I don't really love the accolades. But to think about a kid who was in the weight room at such a young age and threw that tennis ball against the wall, dreaming of pitching in a World Series or playing shortstop and doing a backflip like Ozzie Smith, you know, I had been dedicated to that craft for such a long time. And to see that come to fruition, not only through the minor leagues, into the major leagues, to win a World Series, to win a Gold Glove, to be an all-star for one time, and to now be inducted into a place with the oldest team in the game where guys like Pete Rose and Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan, you know, sit is the culmination of my life's work. And if there is something worth holding a trophy up for, that's it. To say, hey man, all this work I did, my life's work, if it's embodied here in this one trophy or this picture of my face, you know, it means a lot. It also, you know, when you think about your life, when I think about my life, you know, part of the reason I play music is because I think there's a chance that a great grandkid or a great, you know, niece or nephew might pop in a CD and listen to Bronson Arroyo sing versus popping in a VCR tape and watch me pitch. I think there's a chance they'd listen to the music first, right? So part of leaving a legacy here on the planet, because we're all going to be nothing one day, right? I mean, 1,000 years from now, some kid's not going to even know who Adolf Hitler is. Right. And so the guys like Derek Jeter and the biggest names in the game at one time, you know, they're not going to exist anymore except for maybe in a statue in some museum. And to be inside the Reds Hall of Fame and have my face on that wall alongside these other 90 great players that have been here and announcers like your father, you know, is something that makes me proud. It gives me goosebumps when I think about it. And that's hard to do for me.
Bronson, we're so happy for you, so excited for you in the induction and the election. And we thank you for your time today, man. This has been awesome.
I appreciate it, Thom, man. I'm glad to see you're doing a show like this because I've always thought that you were not only was your voice beautiful to listen to, but you go about your craft in the right way, man. And I enjoyed being on here with you. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Bronson Arroyo, kind enough to join us. We asked him to join us for 45 minutes. We ended up keeping him a lot longer than that. But I think we could have kept him. I think everybody agrees. I mean, we could have kept this guy on another 2 hours. That's the best. And my dad's been on this big interview. That's the best interview we've had so far.
I'm glad you said it because I agreed, and I didn't want to mean any disrespect to your dad and how good these last 2 weeks have been. But the interview that Bronson just gave and talking about the history of how he played with the Reds and some of those stories that he told, I was sitting here the entire time listening to that, just enthralled with what he was saying and those stories and hearing his opinion on the lineups and all those little intricacies and everything he talked about with the Reds. That was I hate throwing around unbelievable, but that was an incredible interview.
Well, you know, the thing that struck me, and Casey, you know, well, you're not a baseball guy. What were your thoughts about Bronson Arroyo?
I mean, it was really honestly very interesting to just hear all the different details of how he was feeling. Like, players don't really go into their feelings about their situation. The way he described the difference between New England and Cincinnati, things that, you know, fans kind of, you know, they've thought about the Cincinnati like this for years, how Bengals have been outdated, Reds been outdated, all those sort of things. The way the crowd in New England is when you see a player, how different it is to Cincinnati, how he felt so confident in himself from such a young age, from the minor leagues. I mean, like, that dude never – I couldn't imagine him doing that interview while he was still playing. But literally throughout the entire interview, he never faltered. He had an opinion about something. He stood behind that opinion. He thought highly of himself and should have, obviously.
Yep.
Reds Hall of Famer, crying out loud. Yeah, it was just really interesting, especially the tidbits about the lineups, just like you said, because people want to know what happened in 2012 or what happened in 2010. They want to know those little interesting details like who the leadership was.
Yep.
I mean, people can't – just to give an example, I mean, we can kind of infer about like just to show an example for the Bengals, Uzama and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. But, you know, you wonder about the other guys in the locker room. Like, is Logan Wilson a guy that speaks? Is he a leader in that room?
Yep.
Or, you know, just things like that. And he was giving those details out. It was really interesting.
And I keep getting back to, and you guys aren't there yet. Good Lord willing, you want to be. I pray you are. And I sincerely mean that. I keep getting back to me being a dad, my kids almost out of the house, both of them in a year from now, and the impact. I mean, going all the way to, he kept going back to, whether it was he's on waivers. He kept, and then he goes to Boston, and the following in Boston, and winning a World Series, and then moving on to the Reds, and the playoffs, and then the injuries, and now the election to the Reds Hall of Fame. He always continued to hearken back on the way he was raised. And you cannot, it is impossible. Everyone makes mistakes as a parent. You make them every single day. But it is impossible to try and describe, and I think he just did it better than maybe anybody I've ever interviewed, of the impact you make as a parent and how important it is to be a good dad or a good mom or a good older brother or older sister. He kept coming back to that. Great stuff. We appreciate Bronson Arroyo's time today and insight. All right, do we have a cherry on top? Well, what do we got going on today?
Yeah, we actually have two huge stories that broke during that interview.
Okay, let's hear them.
One is that Bill Self self-imposed a 4-game suspension for what happened back in 2017.
Self-imposed?
Kansas self-imposed a 4-game suspension. So he'll miss the Duke game. But the other bigger news story is that Dan Snyder has hired Bank of America to sell the Washington Commanders.
Wizards.
How big is that?
That's
well, what he did not clarify if it is a majority or a minority stake, but by saying that in the interview, in the statement, he did not say that either way. I wouldn't be shocked
if he's going to Bank of America. You're selling the whole thing, because he's got enough friends of his around with lots of money that he could just have a private conversation with and say, hey, do you want to buy X stake, X, whatever it might be, however they figure out the ownership group, percentage, shares, whatever. It's not a public company. But if he's going to Bank of America to lead this thing, he's looking to sell the whole thing.
Yep.
Wow, two big stories. Okay, so that's our cherry on top.
We actually have one other thing that's a little lighter.
Okay.
OU.
Where is Ohio University in the college football playoff rankings?
Number one.
I mean, where are they? They're first in the MAC. Number one in your hearts. The Ohio University Bobcats, founded in 1804. Oldest college west of the Allegheny Mountains in the United States of America. And yet, they're not on any list with Clemson. Of course they are. They're in front of Clemson. They're in front of Ohio State. Georgia, Michigan, Atlanta, Alabama be damned. Ohio University, where men are men. All right. Fellas, thank you very much. Tomorrow we're doing our picks because I'm gone Friday. But we are starting officially now, right?
Yep.
Boxed lunch. The guys are ready to go. Trace Fowler, Reed Mouse. Fellas, what do you got going on today before we throw it full time to you?
Well, I apologize for delaying the inevitable. I know that you were really passionate about wanting last week not to no, we're not promoting this thing if it's not happening.
That's right.
Got a little sick, got under the weather.
That's right. You're better now.
Better now.
Good
Feeling good. Feeling like I'm back on my feet, if you will. And looking forward to doing this Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays.
Yeah. It was a big hole with you gone in the office. Let me
there
tell
was.
You.
I don't know about that.
There was.
A major presence just lost.
No doubt about it. No doubt. It's great to have you back. What big one or two topics you guys are covering today before I just pass you the basketball? Even though Bill's self-suspended, so he can watch me pass it to Trace.
I don't know when Casey's going to throw up the I don't know what you'd call it, the skin, J-bar, whatever it may be.
Well, you better
Maybe
do
he's
it.
doing
I
now.
got to go to the rest.
I was going to do it when we go to break.
All right.
Fair enough.
Going to break.
But we got a whole host of things. One that we're going to do when you get back from the break is me and Reed decided that our first topic every day is going to be grading your show.
Good. We'll do that when we get back, and I got to go right now. See you in a minute.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
This is the Box Lunch. I am Trace. Who are you?
I'm Rita Roo.
And we are going to start this on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. We are going to also rate Thom's show. Thom's not here. But you can see the topics off the right-hand side. We're going to try to keep it interactive with the chat. See Sir Boy Mars, as usual, in the chat. U.S. veteran. Appreciate you being here. But at the same time, I think that there's going to be probably a little more flair here. Nothing against my man Thom. Best interviewer, and I'm going to say this while he's not in the room.
He's great.
Unbelievable interview. Thom does such a good job of listening to the person talking and being able to fabricate. Here, now we can't say nice things about him because he's coming in. We got to stop talking nice things. But Thom, I guess I will say it when you're here.
They're not saying anything nice about me there. So thank you.
But in all honesty, when I was listening to that interview, it made me realize 2 things. One, I didn't appreciate Bronson Arroyo enough while he was here. The second thing, more importantly probably, is that you do such a good job at what you do.
Well,
and I know we don't say that enough around here. It's an honor and it's a privilege for you to be in this building with us and at least me to be able to at least watch you do what you do, because a lot of people see you. They see you on the screen, yes, but the preparation, I'm just saying the preparation that you do is great. But we're going to get into some other things that aren't so great, which is
well, let me
some
say
of the hot
thank
topics.
you first of all, because that was very, very nice. So
yeah, and
so let's let her rip.
So I got a couple things. One, you talked about momentum in baseball. Do you believe momentum is a real thing in baseball as much as it is other sports? Obviously, I think momentum is a real thing, in my opinion, all the time. But do you think it's a momentum more in baseball or less in baseball than other sports?
What I can tell you is this. I think, to answer your question directly, I think the old adage about momentum begins with the pitcher who's throwing the next day. Okay? And I've often said when people ask me, what do you remember most? A call, a game, blah, blah, blah. The 10 days that I was with the Arizona Diamondbacks in the 2001 World Series, okay? And you got to remember now, this is on the heels a month out from 9/11, okay? And the Diamondbacks opened that World Series at home. Curt Schilling, incredible, beats Roger Clemens. Right. Randy Johnson just dominates the Yankees game 2, Andy Pettit blowout game, like 13-1 or something insane. You got an off day. Now you go into New York, and in that off day, we go into the actual site at 9/11. There's still smoke coming up, piles. It was brutal. It's indescribable. And this was a month later. The whole team went down there because Rudy Giuliani, the mayor at the time, was looking for anybody of any name, entertainers, musicians, athletes, whatever it might, to come down there to kind of give a little support for all those people that were having to dig through this rubble and finding bodies and, anyway. Game 3, Yankee Stadium. A lot of people have seen George Bush comes out, throws a fastball right down the can. Yankee Stadium is just beyond belief rocking. I mean, it's insane. Here comes the Eagle soaring through the stadium. It was unreal. And the Yankees got an energy about them being back there. They won the next 3 games in their last at bat. It was the first time it had ever happened in the history of the World Series, their last at bat.
Right.
So now here's all that momentum now for the Yankees, but they had the day off. And they come to Arizona, and here comes Randy Johnson again. So, do I believe there's something to momentum? Long-winded answer. Diamondbacks win the next 2 games. Johnson, Game 6, Schilling, Game 7. Do I believe there's momentum? I do think teams get a little something going that in that Giant series, that whole Hunter Pence thing, man, I mean, nobody will ever make me believe, and you may not be able to qualify it or quantify it, but they had something about them that Reds team was lacking, and Bronson Arroyo just acknowledged that. They didn't have it.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there, but one thing that Bronson said was about the hard stare. You remember that comment that he made about the hard stare?
Which basically he was saying about Tony La Russa.
Right. How real do you think? That's one thing I've never understood at the professional level. You see this with the Cardinals, you see this with the Steelers. In the professional level, there's so much turnover. Guys come and go, managers come and go. What's it called? The agency comes and goes. But somehow a mentality stays there with the Cardinals, with the Steelers. It makes sense at the college and high school level. Nick Saban's been at Alabama for 20 years. But how can you quantify that at the professional level? But it's true. You see it with the Cardinals.
Well, number one, you got to win games, right? I mean, whoever that person is, they got to win to keep their job. But that's why when so many of these analytics people try to sell me on the idea that managers aren't responsible for more than 3, 4, 5 games a year, I think that's one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard in my life. Because there are managers that separate themselves from the pack because they win a lot of games. They're doing something that makes a difference. It may not necessarily be, did they make the right pitching change in the 7th inning? Did they, should they have not have pinch hit this guy in the 8th? Should they have not have started that guy instead of this guy, whatever it might be? But it's in baseball anyway, and that's what we're talking about here. It's over the long haul. It's 190-something games with spring training, and it's 220 days. And you have to set a tone, and those tone can be different. Dusty's got a different tone and a different vibe than La Russa. La Russa's everything is all the time. Dusty, it's there's some of that, but there's also just But Mike Tomlin, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Mike Tomlin. I mean, I'm not there every day, but there have been some years where the Steelers weren't all that great, but man, you didn't want to play them.
Right. Well, I had wrote on my paper. You took my thunder. I had heard this said to me a long time ago. Momentum is only as good as your next day's starter.
Yeah.
And that I feel like is true in baseball. You might think that you have everything rolling. And the next thing you know, you got a guy that goes out there and he throws 8 shutout innings, and then all of a sudden that just hits a switch. Everybody's high on the Phillies, and obviously in this room, I do hope the Phillies win for 2 reasons. One, I joke with these guys before it all started that the Phillies are going to win. I like when I'm right. I was right about something else. We'll get to that later. But I also like the idea of these guys that are fun to win. The only thing that's going to break my heart is Dusty. That's the only guy that's over there that you really can give a rip about.
That's right.
And I think what you and your dad talked about is, without question, I don't think that he'll ever let out to believe until the day that he dies how much it would mean to him to win a World Series, because at that point he's admitting that he might not have succeeded and done something when he doesn't need to do that.
Yep.
But at the same time, I do think there's something fun and energetic about this Phillies team. It goes back to your point about that situation back in 2012 that hurts my heart. And I don't know, was this in the common knowledge? Bronson Arroyo just drops a bombshell on me out there.
I've never
Breaks
heard that
my heart.
about a Cueto and
batting practice.
Yeah. And then Cueto coming back and not being given a chance to at least throw the ball. He did those exercises he talked about.
Right.
You're making the decision to keep him on the roster.
Yep. And that arguably, and in my opinion, and I give the Reds hell for a lot of things, I can make the argument of why they would have chosen to go with a Homer Bailey contract over Cueto after that small sample size, I get it, of what happened in the postseason. You have a guy that was supposed to go out game 1 of the NLDS, gets hurt, struggles, can't come back, doesn't pitch again. Homer Bailey's this up-and-coming guy you've heard him talked about in the farm system from the time he got drafted.
That's right.
We got Homer Bailey. He's coming down the pike. And that guy goes out, and like it or not, I'm not saying I'm a big Homer guy, but he shoved it in Game 3. He absolutely went out there and shoved it.
Great.
And he looked like a guy similar to a Kurt Schilling type of guy.
Yes, he did.
A no-nonsense.
Yep.
I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to shove it right up your ass.
Yes, he did.
And that's what he looked like in Game 3. So when the Reds off-season had to make a decision. They said, do we want to sign this Homer guy or do we want to sign Cueto? I understand why they did Homer. But to think that this is where it just goes back to just Cincinnati and you just drop your head. To think that might have all stemmed off the fact that Johnny Cueto just wanted to be funny in a fucking batting cage, excuse my language.
Yeah.
Maybe Johnny Cueto goes out and dominates Game 1.
Yeah.
Dominates Game 2 now I know I'm getting really hypothetical, but maybe he goes out and dominates throughout the entire postseason, and that's the guy they choose.
Well, he'd have been the guy if he doesn't get hurt that pitches Game 5.
I know.
I mean, you'd have
doesn't.
had Cueto in Game 1, Bronson in Game 2. You have
Homer
in
Game
3, Latos in Game 4, who was great that year for the Reds. People can badmouth him all they want. That year he was great. The next year he was even better when Cueto got hurt and he was the ace. But that's the way that thing would have stacked up.
And that's just incredible that something as simple as like, hey, I'm going to be funny, go in the batting cage and say, look how hard I'm going to hit the ball tonight, and you tweak your back or you do whatever you do to your back. You just, as a fan and as a reporter, you're never going to hear that. Johnny Cueto's never going to come out to the media and say, yeah, I was messing around in batting practice and I hurt my back. But Bronson, who's very well spoken, by the way. I mean, incredibly intellectual type of guy. You can tell just by listening to him. Man, I'm not saying he was throwing guys under the bus, but the beautiful thing about that interview was he wasn't shy about telling you how he felt.
And I mean, I love the just talking about leadership. And that's another thing that, look, there have been 8 billion books written about leadership and good leadership, bad leadership. I can only judge it on just being around Major League Baseball teams. And as I said to him, I thought you have to have a vocal kind of leader. He agreed, and just being around that Reds clubhouse, what he said is so true. The guys who you're expecting to be that guy because they're the best players doesn't always mix with that particular individual's personality. Votto's just not that guy, and it's not knocking Joey Votto. He's one of the greatest players in the history of the franchise, but that's just not him, and that's okay.
Right.
And whoever the other one was, Scott Rowland.
Yeah,
another guy. Love Scott Rowland. Gamer, tough, great example guy.
Right.
There are a lot of example guys.
Isn't it weird how a guy like Johnny Gomes, which he came to the Reds,
no doubt.
A guy like Johnny Gomes is maybe the glue. He's the edge that gets you over the proverbial hump. And you just That's where, to me, I'm not against analytics completely. But you have to acknowledge that humans play the sport.
Yeah.
And you have to acknowledge that you can't analytically do anything from something that you can't control metrically, like the brain. I mean, you have no idea.
I loved hearing his. I mean, there were so many things about that interview. You're right that I'm just saying I'm not patting myself on the back.
No, you were fantastic.
But I just loved when I asked him, because again, outsider looking in, even though I'm traveling with a team every day, I thought in that year of 12 they win 97, Nationals win 97. I thought the Reds were a better team. But it's interesting to ask Arroyo that question, and he says, our lineup, a lot of swing and miss. A lot of hot and cold.
And that's how it felt.
A lot of swing and miss, a lot of hot and cold. That's the state of the game now almost entirely.
It is.
But for a player to be able to be around long enough to have played on a world championship team where he has a point of reference, and then to look at your current team and say, ooh, our pitching's good enough, but our offense, are we too much hot and cold, swing and miss? And that's what they were, because if you remember, they came back here after scoring all those runs in San Francisco, and they couldn't do anything against some very mediocre Giants pitching in those last 3 games.
Yeah.
Barry Zito.
And
Great
I
career,
feel like
but, he was done.
The way that the Reds were built, and that's the fear that I have moving on when you get into this analytical game, is that, in my opinion, I think putting the ball in play does matter.
It does matter.
I think that trying to grind out at-bats does matter. Brennaman's is maybe not a very good example, but I don't know how many people are watching this game this late. But in the 8th inning, Alex Brennaman went up there, and the game was over. It was, I think, 7-0 maybe at this point. And he was just grinding out an at-bat that looked like it was very, very meaningful. I don't know how many pitches it was, 8, 9, 10 pitches, and he walks. And, that might not mean shit to most people that just watch baseball, but if you stack up guys like that in a lineup that are just tough outs, it wears on guys. It wears on pitching.
No doubt.
And at the end of the day, the Reds have seemed like, for time and time again, that whatever run they had, you know what to call it, 11, 12, 13, they had a bunch of what I would consider extremely streaky guys.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it hit the Reds at the wrong time. And I don't think that type of player holds up well under pressure, personally.
No. Well, especially in the postseason.
That's what I'm saying. When it gets really thick, those swing and miss guys usually swing a hell of a lot more and miss a hell of a lot more. But damn, it kind of brought back some really sorrow memories, obviously, from the 2012 time frame.
No doubt. So are you guys going to make a habit of giving me a grade? Is that what's going to happen? Am I going back to my days?
I don't think we're going to give you a grade, but I just wanted to bring up points during the show.
Right.
What I liked, what I didn't like. What you said, what I didn't like.
Sure.
On Monday and Fridays, when the takes are flowing from you, Tom, we'll
days
back
we kind of
against
take it easier on you because you just give these great interviews. But these Mondays and Fridays are probably going to be a little different.
Did I sign up for this with you two guys?
Yeah.
Did I sign up for this?
Yeah.
I think it's part of your contract. Yeah.
It's written in the fine print.
Tom, do you think you make the Mount Rushmore of OU grads?
Well, put it this way, okay?
Mike Schmidt.
Here's what I could tell you, okay? One of the funniest lines I've ever heard in my life, and how prophetic it turned out to be, unfortunately. One of the funniest lines, a very close friend of mine who I went to college with at OU. 2 of the most famous broadcasting alum at Ohio University history are Roger Ailes.
Okay.
And Matt Lauer.
I knew Matt Lauer. Did not know Roger Ailes.
Roger Ailes built Fox News into this empire that it is now. Whatever. Okay, whether you watch it, like it, dislike it, irrelevant. It is the most dominant station ever created in the history of mankind. It cannot be denied just by viewership. Roger Ailes built this thing. He was given tens of millions of dollars to Ohio University. They named the building after him at Ohio University.
I don't like where this is going.
Well, then, as we know, there was a movie made about it, about his indiscretions with women. So they no longer took his money, they being Ohio University, and they took his name off the building. Matt Lauer.
Yeah.
All right, they're going to put his name on the building. We know what happened with Matt Lauer. So a friend of mine says to me, hey, whatever you do, if they come to you and ask to put your name on that building, don't do it. Well, they never came to me. But I would have given them a reason to take it off.
My friends went to OU, and they said, you guys were talking about Texas Roadhouse yesterday.
Yeah.
So in Texas Roadhouse, wherever they go, they put a mural of local famous people. Like in here, they have Wally Zerbiak because he went to Miami, and they have the Big Red Machine. My friend told me there was a Matt Lauer mural in the Texas Roadhouse in Athens, Ohio.
Really?
And since then, they have painted over it and just put the Texas Roadhouse Armadillo over top of Matt Lauer.
Well, I can't speak to Matt Lauer. I don't know Matt Lauer.
Wow.
I don't know. But, yeah, we obviously have some very famous people and infamous.
I'd put you on the.
You got anything else from his show? I got one other thing. It's gonna be for Paul though. Paul said that, and I know why you said it, but Paul said that Dayton's gonna be a top 25 team. I think Dayton's gonna be a top 10 team. In fact, I think Dayton returns all 5 starters off of a pretty good team last year,
right, then.
who was young.
Yeah,
I know, but I'm saying to the viewership, let it be known that I think Dayton will be a 3-seed or better come tournament time.
Okay.
Oh.
We'll hold you to that.
And I also seen a graphic today, Paul. I'm gonna let, maybe you can defend yourself here. They had Xavier. It was one of those weird graphics where you can kind of see the entire United States of America, and every single state had the logo of the team that was the best team in that state, and they had an X on that. Can you believe that somebody had the audacity to put Xavier as the best team?
I believe it.
From last year?
From this year.
Oh, I thought. Well.
Matt Norlander wrote that article. Matt Norlander does that for CBS Sports every year, and he picks the best team. He ranks all 363 teams. He ranks every team, the best team in each state, and he puts their logo on each state. He picked Xavier to win the Big East, and he's just doubled and tripled down on it over and over and over again. So he's not going to back up.
Oh, so he's like you guys in the Browns, basically, is what you're getting at?
No, I think
no.
what
I think
he's saying
like
is a fair point. He's saying that of all the college basketball teams in the state of Ohio this year, okay, not going into the year, but if it played out where Dayton wins the A-10, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're in?
Yeah.
Okay, outside of Ohio State winning the Big Ten,
yeah,
okay, which you're not projected to do. They're in the middle of the pack, whatever they are. Okay, if Xavier wins the Big East, I think most people would probably logically come to the conclusion that they're the best team in the state of Ohio.
Yeah. And
outside of OU.
And Norlander, who wrote that article, has been like the premier Xavier flag bearer for the last 3 months, so he's not going to back down from his take. So that's why he did that. But yes, I did see that.
And that's why I said it's kind of like you guys in the Browns. So you're saying he's not going to back down from his take, even though he's wrong, because Dayton's the best team in Ohio. But what you're saying is, you guys, at what point, this is the last question I have for you guys, I'm being serious. I don't want to sit up here and be braggadocious about the Browns thing. I do have a serious question, though. At what point do you stop saying that they stink?
There's no doubt.
Hang on.
There's no doubt. I said it before the game.
Seriously. And I see people in the chat talking about they stink.
I can defend this. Just because
one team
that stinks beats another team that stinks doesn't mean that they don't stink.
That's good logic.
So the logic is, in your opinion, Casey, and this is where I just, and we're not going to go. I don't want to go beat the dead horse. We got a lot of topics today. I just genuinely think that your kind of what I would call your rationalization of stink is bad. I mean, the idea that you can only win a Super Bowl and that means that you're not in the stink category. I mean, your list, Casey, is like
win a playoff game.
Casey, we are going to clarify. I asked you to do it yesterday, and we didn't have time today with Arroyo coming on there and my dad. Tomorrow, you're going to now qualify and quantify moving forward what is the definition of stink.
Yeah.
Okay? And it is not going to be, can a team win a Super Bowl? That's not going to be it.
That's not
going to be it. All right, I'm going to throw this over to you guys. Trace, Reed, you guys, before I let you go, and we're here tomorrow with picks.
We need to get you a
good luck with the show, number one. Number two, Trace, Georgia v. Tennessee. I don't care about spread. I don't care about any of it. Who's the winner in that one?
I mean, I'll have this take on Friday. Obviously, you're not going to be here. We haven't really talked in depth about that. We're going to figure out. People are asking in the show. We'll have a programming. I am going to go on the same take that I've been on before. I think I'm just as passionate about Georgia beating Tennessee as I was about the Browns beating the Bengals.
Okay. All right. Reed, you agree or disagree?
Reed. I've taught Reed
Reed's got a pretty good record this year.
I've taught Reed all that he knows.
Pretty good run.
The crawl says itself. I don't even know if I can. Yeah, there it is. Reed can't pay his mortgage this month. It's crawling across the bottom of the screen because I got to owe my bookie so much money. If I come in here with some broken knees, Tom, you understand why. It's because I'm on a losing streak.
All right, so Tennessee or Georgia? Who's winning the game?
Georgia.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, here we go, boys. I'm passing it over to you.
Fair enough.
You got it.
That's pretty good.
All right,
That's
fellas.
a good toss.
Adios. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Thom.
It is time for Box Lunch. Trace Fowler, Reed Mouse. Take it away, gentlemen.
All right. Well, you came up with some topics. I came up with some topics. Right. One of the topics that you came up with was Coach Taylor. I think this is becoming relatively tired, but at the same time, you go ahead with whatever you want to talk about Zach Taylor.
Well, I mean, it's at this point, this is something that everyone has talked about, but how much of what is transpiring this year has to do with Zach Taylor as the head coach? And, you know, we can talk about the Bengals as a whole lot. And I know you guys I know Paul and Casey and Thom talk about it on their show quite a bit. They talked about Zach Taylor earlier on in the year. I think it is the play calling thing is tired, but I think it's well warranted when we talk about it every single week because it hasn't gotten any better. And the first time we talked about their play calling, I remember, was last year in the San Francisco game in overtime when we didn't give Joe Burrow a chance to win that ball game. But how much of this, in Trace as an outside looker, looking inward to this Bengals team, how much of what has been a lackluster season to this point for the Bengals been because of Zach Taylor, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think Zach Taylor can block. That was the first. That's the main issue that I have. If you're going to be a good football team, and obviously Tom's brought this up on the show, you have to be able to run the ball and be able to run the ball when you want to run the ball. And not only that, you have to be able to protect your quarterback at least long enough to see him get through a couple progressions. So the thing that's been proven so far this year is if they can protect and they can run the ball, then they do well. They play teams like Atlanta who can't rush the quarterback, but then they go and they play the Cowboys and they have trouble. But at the end of the day, how much is that Taylor versus somebody else? I don't know. But at the same time, Taylor's the leader, and that's what he needs to probably become, in my opinion. He needs to get his ass out of the whole play calling situation.
Sure.
Because one, I don't know if he's great at that anyways. But I do think that he's got a decent culture building mentality. He's is he like the Dusty Baker of coaching in the NFL? Is that what he is?
Could be. Yeah, I mean that's a fair. I mean maybe we're undercrediting Dusty Baker's career, but
no, I don't mean
there's a lot of similarities, and people obviously enjoy playing for Zach Taylor. There's no doubt about that. They talk about it every time, and even when the players speak about what it's like in their locker room, it's incredibly abundantly clear that there is a nice culture there, a great culture, a winning culture. It just hasn't translated it to on the field. And you mentioned the offensive line, and I talk about this. When you talk about building a roster in football, the four most important in this order things are quarterback, Bengals got it. Then the second would be tackles and offensive line. Then you go defensive pass rush, and then you go secondary. All the other positions trickle in after that. Linebackers, safeties, running backs, and we'll get to running backs takes later.
Right.
But the
Bengals,
Bengals,
are you on the train or not?
Am I on the Zach? I would like
keep it moving. Are you on the train or not? I'll tell you my opinion.
To keep him in the role, yeah, I'm not out on him. He shouldn't be put off. I think he should be relegated to a leader on this team, as you mentioned, and
right.
You need to get somebody else in there calling plays.
Right. The only option, in my opinion, would be somebody needs to sit down with him and say, listen, we have a finite window here, and the things that we had built upon last year are obviously not progressing in the direction we want. We need to find somebody that can come in and call plays, and here's one reason why. Casey, I don't know if you have the full screen graphic or not, but I talk about protecting the quarterback, and you can kind of see there. Move the J-bar out there. Yep. So I think P. Ryan should play way more than he has been. And I've been saying this, and people want to be like, I know Mixon's a jersey selling kind of guy. I know he's the name brand guy. I understand all of those things. And I'm not saying Mixon's even what I would say a bad player, but everybody has this cliff of NFL running backs. Todd Gurley is the perfect example of a guy that 2 years ago might have been an elite rusher. And then 2 years later, you're not the same guy. You get banged up every single day, and through 2 or 3 seasons of the NFL, you can fall straight off a cliff. And the idea of playing P. Ryan more, in my opinion, is being able to actually protect the quarterback. And then also, P. Ryan's not a bad runner. He's a hard runner. And how many runs is P. Ryan going to possibly negate that Mixon would have is my question to you. How many times is Mixon going to have a 25-yard run when P. Ryan would only run it 5 yards?
Right. Well, you've got to ask yourself, what is Joe Mixon in? And I think Bengals fandom is relatively in unison about Joe Mixon at this point. But what does Joe Mixon do as a rusher at this point well? And Casey, Paul, you guys can chime in whenever you want. When you see Joe Mixon on the field, what does he do well? I mean, yeah, here's this graphic. Joe Mixon, 65th out of 67 off PFP out of running backs.
Right.
He's the third worst running back in the league. And we keep handing him off. He gets more carries. He's not fast. He does it. I mean, he's a big back, but does he break out of tackles all that often? Does he see the field well? At this point in the season, he's doing nothing well.
How many times, when you were watching this game, I know you guys get caught in your fandom, and I understand when I watch games of the teams that I like, sometimes it's hard for me to actually kind of see the game and relax and understand and see things differently, right?
Blinders.
But when you were watching that game on Monday night, at any moment did it not appear to you that Mixon just didn't have it? I mean, he's dropping balls out of the backfield, right? Chris Evans runs down the sideline, makes a turnaround grab on the first play of the game. Put the graphic up there one more time, Casey or Paul. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got you.
Whoever it may be. One more time. How in the hell can Chris Evans have two snaps in a football game when on one of the first plays of the game, he runs down the sideline and catches the ball spinning out of play, and you got a guy up there, what's his name? Mike Thomas? Got 24 snaps?
Man, You're preaching to the choir here, man.
Yeah, Mike Thomas got one target, too, in 24 snaps.
So at the end of the day, that, in my opinion, falls on the head coach. And obviously you could say some of it's play calling, but at the end of the day, you got to put guys in positions to succeed. So
did you hear on Monday night, they said that the Browns were shopping around Kareem Hunt, and you could get Kareem Hunt for a fourth rounder?
Oh, man.
Insane.
Listen,
That's
I'm
what they were
all
shopping
about
around, and no one
that.
took the bite.
Can't be true. Here's the one thing. I don't know. We can all go around the room really quickly. Are you guys a believer? And we're going to go on to the college football playoff rankings right after this. Someone brings up a great point. P. Ryan had one carry for 7 yards. I don't know. It's not bad. But are you of the mindset that you value picks over players? I mean, obviously you can't get ludicrous about it. You can't trade like 5 first-round picks for one guy or something crazy. But if you are, I guess, the Bengals, would you take a Kamara for a first-round pick next year?
Well, it depends on where you're at as a state of a team. If you're in a rebuild, then yeah, you take the picks over players. If you're where the Bengals at, where you feel like you've got the majority of the roster there, yeah, then you get the players. I don't know if the Bengals should be dishing out picks for running backs. I think that's because I'm out on running back as a tool in the NFL anyways. I think running backs are a dime a dozen. And that graphic I mentioned earlier, but I didn't get to say this, and I've said this for 3 years now. Draft a running back every 3 years in the second or third round. That's all you do. Look, you draft a running back in the second or third round every 3 years. Don't pay him. Repeat, rinse, and repeat. You mentioned Todd Gurley. You can go back over the past 15 years since the game has evolved. There's a new running back that is the best in the league every 2 years. Jonathan Taylor now. Derrick Henry. Go back to the early 2010s. Chris Johnson. Granted, there's going to be an Adrian Peterson and a LaDainian Tomlinson sprinkled in there every once in a while. But for the most part, they're a dime a dozen.
No, and I think it's been proven in the NFL. I mean, you got guys like the Packers, obviously, is the team that I follow closely. Aaron Jones is a guy that, I mean, he wasn't even theoretically a running back, and the next thing you know, he turns out one of the better backs in the league.
Can Chris Johnson stop returning kickoffs, please, though?
And
just, I'm not saying he shouldn't be out there.
I will say the last point I was going to make about the Browns-Bengals game. Maybe you guys talked about this on Monday. I know you said you were preaching to the choir, Casey, a little bit. I didn't get to hear everything that you guys said the other day. At what point was Joe Burrow ever considered about taking out of the football game?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, what happens? I'm just going to throw out a shitty hypothetical. What happens if Joe Burrow goes down when you're down?
Yeah, down.
What was it, 32 to whatever?
It was 25-0 in the third, right?
What? You guys get my point.
Regardless,
at the end of the day,
if
he gets hurt in the fourth quarter, down 4 scores in a game that looks like it's not going well, it's a shitty night. You need to get up out of there. I mean, I guess the question I would have for you is 2 questions. Then we're moving on. One, would Zach Taylor would be on the hot seat, considered to be fired if they lost the first-round playoff game last year with the same regular season?
US veteran.
And then secondarily to that, Joe Burrow would get hurt in a situation like last Monday.
If Joe Burrow got hurt in that situation, Zach Taylor should be out of the league. Yeah, it's just dumb. I mean, that was the initial reaction from everyone.
Well, I sent that text in with 2 or 3 minutes left in the third quarter.
Right.
Why is he still playing in the game?
Put Brandon Allen.
They scored the first touchdown. Maybe you get a stop or two. You score another touchdown, and it's like, all right, you still need 3 more.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's the one thing that everybody always says, like, oh, coaches know more than the general public.
Right.
I think sometimes coaches are just
coaches have so many.
They get it ingrained in their head that they're one way, and they don't consider that. Sometimes
coaches,
it's just be realistic.
I mean, you do it with this company. You've got 30 things going on at one time that you sometimes oversee things that are relatively easy. I'll ask you, all three of you guys, this. Right now, DraftKings has the Bengals odds to make the postseason at -120 and to not make the postseason at even money, +100. If you had to take a side on that, which are you taking?
I said before the season there was no value either way because I think these odds were pretty close to this preseason too. I think they were like -170 maybe preseason, so they haven't moved a ton. Right now,
they have to go 6-3.
I mean, it's a simple question. Do you think they'll make the postseason or not?
Yeah, I still do think they'll sneak
All right,
in.
fair enough. Casey?
I'm not as high on it.
Casey
got burned.
Casey, man. Come on, Casey.
Oh, boy, Casey.
Was that ribeye steak
Here's
ruined you up?
No, here's the issue is you lose arguably your second best defender on your team besides DJ Reader.
3 of the 4 best players on the Bengals are out as of now.
Correct.
Jamar Chase, DJ Reader,
and I
Chidobe
don't care what they say about Jamar Chase. If it's a hip injury and there's a hairline fracture, that thing might not be healed until next season. We don't really know.
All right, fair enough.
Just because he's a different guy doesn't mean that he's going to be able to play. And then we still don't really know anything about DJ Reader, and it just isn't looking good for the Bengals. I think that they should just.
Can I be a little bit of a fountain now instead of a drain for all of you Bengals fans? I think that I came in here and I tried to tell you guys about how bad you guys were and how you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. This is what I will say about the Bengals. I think that there's still time to get the ship right. And I also think it is very, very fortunate for the Bengals for the next 2 to 3 weeks that they don't play teams that are really good.
Yeah.
They have teams that are beatable. They are going to win. I think I haven't looked at it in depth yet, but I think they're going to win this upcoming Sunday.
Touchdown favorites.
Yeah, that's a good sign. That's a very, very good sign based off the way that they looked on Monday night. It's a good sign that Vegas thinks that they're still a touchdown favorite. So I would expect them to win that game. At the end of the day, I do think it's going to come down to 3 teams and laugh up one tree down the other. I don't care. It's going to come down to whether the Browns can get hot and then they can get Watson back. It can come down to, obviously, the Ravens, who are the front runner, and I think the Bengals are still going to be right in the thick of it. In the division, yes.
Well, it's a good thing. Division record doesn't matter towards winning the division. It's the secondary thing. It's your overall record, then your division record. Yeah. Because the Bengals are 0-3, so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But obviously, if it comes down to a tiebreaker situation, you might get in some trouble. But at the end of the day, I don't think the Ravens are unbeatable in any given week. Like every single week, I think the Ravens could lose the football game. The Browns have proven they can do that, and the Bengals are right there. So that is my fountain of hope for Bengals fans.
And here's the drain.
Here we go.
On,
so,
Casey.
what is this? Some
Come
role
on,
reversal
Casey.
bullshit?
This is the last thing we should talk about.
Yeah, we're done with these clowns.
After this. The Ravens do not play a team above a 500 record the rest of the season. That's not good. So they're probably a shoo-in for the division at this point. So you're looking at wild card. And when we're looking at wild card, that's more realistic. I think we should probably put to bed the fact that they can probably win this division. It's not going to happen. Just not with the Ravens' schedule, not with their 0-3 division record. So let's try to find a way for them to get in the wild card.
Yeah, I'm not giving up on the division, Casey. Casey, really quickly, we're going to be done with this. Who do the Ravens play this weekend? Do we know that? If not, we'll get to it later.
I'll pull it up real quick.
All right, let's go to the college football playoff rankings. You go ahead and show off what we got here. What we got?
Our esteemed executive producer, Sean Spurlock, because the dude's just been winning money.
Yeah,
left
he
and
wins
right.
a bunch of money left and
and
right.
doesn't tell us about the picks.
anybody.
Isn't that terrible?
I mean, that is the most ridiculous bullshit.
Me and Trace are drowning in debt because of our picks being bad. But you know what? We got a little box lunch, and look at this.
Yeah, we do. What we got here?
What's in there?
What we got here?
What's in there?
This is like a high end. These aren't the lunch.
We got a turkey, cheddar, and sub sandwich from Lunchable, and the price of a Lunchable has not gone up with inflation. So there you go.
So you're saying it's a value?
Yeah, it's a good value.
I'm gonna eat this while we're doing our deal.
Kool-Aid.
It's the Saints, by the way.
So the college football, the Saints. So they can get beat this week. We'll start with that. All right, we'll start that. We'll do it 1 week at a time. You never know in the NFL, fellas. I mean, what kind of? I got mayonnaise.
Did you get turkey and cheddar?
I got turkey and cheddar. Where's the snack? Kind of.
It's Hershey Kisses. It looks like.
Does this take out the spin wheel for lunch?
I'm a big boy. I'm sure I can eat.
This is what's wrong with America. Okay, back when my day, you got a real dessert. What in the hell is this? Is this a Michelle Obama bullshit
I blame
or what?
Michelle Obama.
I mean,
Michelle
what is
Obama
this? What is
ruined
this
our
type
life
of
in middle
shit?
school.
I mean, come on, man.
That's a Hershey Kiss.
You can't even see it on screen. It's
Is
so
it one?
bad.
Is it
I mean,
one?
that's my dessert. That's what they're giving me today.
Oh no.
That is bad.
Well, that's why the price of a Lunchable hasn't gone up. They're
Exactly.
skimping you inside the box.
Yeah, that is terrible.
Thanks, Sean, for getting us some.
Yeah, we
is
appreciate
this payment for?
I think this is an
for
everyday,
skipping us out on those
every time
picks?
we're on thing. But college football playoff rankings come out. Let's be honest, they're relatively worthless. Go ahead and throw them up really quickly.
Yeah.
I think most people have obviously already seen them already. You got Tennessee 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Clemson 4, which I put in the ticker. Clemson's like the token, like ugly girl in the pretty girl group. You know what I'm saying? You got to have one of them to make them all look better.
For being funny.
Are we though? I mean, it's kind of true. I think that Clemson, we can all agree, is not a playoff team. They're more than likely probably going to get beat this weekend, is what I'm seeing.
Who do they play?
Notre Dame.
Let's go.
They play Notre Dame. Michigan's obviously right there. Is there anything about this that seems kind of wild to anybody?
So,
chat, I'm waiting to hear from you.
So my thing is,
What's your thing?
The Michigan-Ohio State game, which is in 2 or 3 weeks?
It is the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Saturday after Thanksgiving, okay. Well, I mean...
Second most important rivalry that day.
My issue is Alabama's going to sneak in there if Clemson does, in fact, lose.
Well, the only way Alabama's going to sneak in there is if they win the SEC championship game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? So ultimately, there's not to make this too sterile and not fun. But at the end of the day, Georgia plays Tennessee for a chance to make the college football playoff this weekend, right? Whoever wins that game is automatically in, as long as they don't lose to someone they're not supposed to, clearly. Alabama has a chance to redeem themselves and win in the SEC championship game. If that happens, the crazy thing, in my opinion, unless Ohio State and Michigan trip up, they're going to have a playoff game to get in there, and then your fourth team's going to come out of there. Listen to me. It's going to come out of either the Big 12 or, Paul's been saying it, I'm going to give Paul some credit, Oregon still has a chance. And the reason Oregon has a chance is this. I'm thinking this is going to happen. I know I'm a fan, but I'm seeing the writing on the wall. We'll get into it on Friday. I think that Tennessee's going to get their ass beat. And when Tennessee gets their ass beat, it's going to make everybody think, wow, maybe that loss to Georgia at the very beginning of the year in Atlanta for Oregon isn't as bad as we all thought.
Okay, let me ask you guys something. Who of these three teams has the best chance of making college football playoff? USC, TCU, or Oregon?
USC,
TCU, or Oregon? Oregon, USC, one-loss teams. TCU undefeated. TCU has Texas Tech, and Baylor still on the schedule. USC has UCLA and Notre Dame still on the schedule. Oregon has Oregon State and Utah.
I mean, I'll take TCU. Of those three, I'll take TCU.
Over the Big 12 or Pac-12?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're
TCU definitely.
They're ranked above them right now, so they already have the leg up. If they do their job, if they go undefeated, of those three teams, yeah, I mean, TCU's already a spot ahead of Oregon, 2 spots ahead of USC. Only
some things you have to factor in that question, in my opinion, though, is how realistic do you think it is that they will go undefeated, right? Is TCU going to go
undefeated? TCU's the best team.
I mean, we all know that if TCU goes undefeated, they're going to obviously be in. Well,
I mean, they're
more than likely going to be in. That's very, very high likelihood. But
how good is Texas Tech? Not very good. Now I'm looking at it. But
well,
they
got to play.
Texas.
They got to play a championship game, right? And they're going to probably have to play
Oklahoma State.
They already
Kansas
beat Oklahoma State. And Kansas State.
I know that they've already played Oklahoma State, but there's just weird things that happen in college football sometimes to where you might think that you take care of a team once and then they come back and turn around and beat you, like Georgia did to Alabama last year. So I'm not sold on the fact that TCU is a shoe-in to go undefeated. I think TCU is the answer, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's any question about that.
Do you think it's more likely? Now these are 3 wild scenarios. Do you think it's more likely that both the Pac-12 and the Big 12 get a team in there,
or
that there's 2 Big 10 teams in there, or that there's 3 SEC teams in there?
3 SEC teams, I think, is
Out
impossible.
of all those 3 scenarios, the most likely is the 3 SEC?
That's impossible.
No, not most likely.
Okay, so what's the most likely out of those 3 scenarios? That there's a Big 12 and a Pac-12 team in the Final Four?
Of those 3, yeah, because the Big Ten, Ohio State and Michigan will knock each other out. And then, yeah, I would say that to get a Pac-12 team and a Big 12, because you put TCU and Oregon in there. TCU finishes undefeated, wins the Big 12, they'd get in. And then Oregon, if they win the Pac-12, they'd need some help, but they could get in too.
There's no way. Is there any way that the Big 12 or the Big 10 gets 2 teams in?
That's what we're talking about.
That's a no. Right?
You would need.
Sorry, I'm trying to find my mayonnaise. It's pissing me off. I can't find it.
You can't tie at all in college, right? It just keeps going and going.
No, what would happen is Michigan would need
correct.
to beat Ohio State because everyone's so high on Ohio State. It'd have to be a close game that Michigan barely wins, and then Michigan wins the Big 10 championship. And then Ohio State gets in as the 4 seed, as a 1-loss 4 seed.
Yeah.
For them to get 2 in there.
I still think getting TCU and Oregon is more realistic than that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
On to the next topic.
Yeah, what we got next?
Fickle.
Yeah, I think this is obviously a little bit of a clickbaity kind of, some would say.
Oh, come on, sell it, Trace.
It's the only thing that would fit in the ticker. That's the way I would say it. The only thing that would fit in the side is a little Fickle fiasco. And I've been passionate about this a little bit for a little while, and I haven't said anything because it's one of those things where I don't know. One, I don't know if I care enough to go too vocal about it. Mm-hmm. But one is, I do think that you have to respect the fact that Fickle knows way more than I ever will about football, and I openly admit that. I also openly admit that there are times in which football coaches make decisions that aren't relatively rational and realistic and the right thing to do. And I think right now you can say whatever you like about UC, but can anyone tell me who won the AAC in 14?
Did it exist in 2014?
Well, I don't know.
Louisville?
The AAC? Yeah, that was its first year.
So whoever won who won in college football in 2015, 16, 17. My point is that we probably can't do that. So how much value should we be placing in the idea of winning our last year in the AAC? Now, I know that's easy to say. I know that's one of those things where you're not going to walk into the clubhouse or the locker room and tell your guys, hey, we don't give a shit about winning this championship. We've been talking about winning all year long. That's not my point. I do think, though, that at some point when you move into the Big 12, you have got to figure out whether or not you got somebody down the pike that you want, that you can go to battle with in the Big 12. And you got a guy right now that was a highly rated recruit in Prater that we know nothing about, little to nothing about. Right. The guy's been in not that many games. He did, to be fair, had to come in late into a football game against South Florida on homecoming.
Looks good.
And he looked pretty decent.
Looks good.
He looked pretty decent. He looked like a guy that might be able to right the ship. He led them back. They won the game. And I get the idea that when you go to practice every day, maybe he doesn't look the best. Maybe he's a guy that, you might not have as much faith in him right now. But I'll also say this. I'm not saying I'm not a Fickle guy. I like Luke Fickle a lot. But we have a clip. I pulled up a clip that he's openly admitting that sometimes he's not always right about a guy.
Play the clip.
You realize you got a guy named Sauce Gardner
Chatterbox
on the
Jr.
team, or you just like, okay, well, he's starting.
Oh, yeah.
I don't need to see him practice.
No, actually, no, he was sitting on the bench as a freshman. He was 155 pounds, and the only reason he went in the game is we were playing UCF, and they run 125 plays in the game. So we're like, we got to substitute these guys. And the first series he was in, he broke up a ball. And the second series he was in, he pick-sixed it. And I'm like, okay, we're not quite as smart a coaches as I thought we were. We better keep this guy in the game.
Yeah,
So,
that's why you need a dumb guy on your coaching staff like us who sees the name Sauce Gardner. We're like, you have to start Sauce.
Yes. Yes.
well, at that point in time, until he was drafted, he was just a mod to me. And guys that walk in with those self-proclaimed nicknames, they don't usually rise to the top in our program right away. After that pick six, I think it was one of those things where more people started to recognize that nickname.
And we're back.
So it brings a point that I'm trying to make. What?
That guy doesn't know pigskin, does he?
No, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. What I'm trying to say is this. I've been around enough athletic programs. I've been around enough teams to know.
Yeah, 2 of them are gone.
There are some. Yeah, that is true. There are some guys that when the lights come on, they perform. Sure. They play better than whatever they look in practice.
A little bit of swagger to them.
They have the ability, for whatever reason, they can find a way to play their best when the lights are the brightest. And sometimes in practice, whatever reason, they don't show whatever they can show when they're in the game. And I just want to see, what does Prater have? What does he look like? Give him substantial reps in practice. Give him first-team reps and let him go out there for two Saturdays, or I guess they play on Fridays from time to time down there in the AAC, which proves my point. You might as well just get ready for the Big 12, big boy football, and see what you have. Is there anything wrong with that?
No, let him play. I mean, he's a good athlete. I do remember when the first game, you remember they played Arkansas, and Ben Bryant looked like trash, absolute trash, and all these beat writers just kept saying, like, remember, Ben Bryant clearly won this quarterback battle in the offseason, but we've seen the tape. It's not getting better with Ben Bryant. Let Evan Prater do his thing. Simple as that.
Well, I think at the beginning of the year you had to
right, let Ben
you
Bryant
had to at least let the guy that you thought was going to
leash.
give you the best chance to win the game go out there and play. But we're at a point now where you have to find out what you have going into the next year. It's as simple as that. And I'm not going to go and beat down a dead horse and act like Fickle doesn't know what he's doing or anything of that nature. But I do think that there are times where coaches, hard-headed or not, I've seen Kirby do this from time to time down at Georgia, and Sean makes fun of me because Justin Fields didn't get to play his freshman year. There are times where you do realize that just the guy that's in there, and just because he's winning football games, doesn't mean he's the right guy. And you could say the same thing that happened at Ohio State when Meyer was there. But you can never really fault a coach that's at a big Power 5 school, in my opinion, when they have a guy that's winning football games to take him out. If you're in the situation that Fickle's in right now, you're not at a Power 5. You got to figure it out.
Sure. Let's move on.
All right. Next one up, fellas. It is baseball ratings.
Baseball. Yeah, this is something you were talking about with the
ratings
for baseball. The
Yeah,
World Series.
and I'll let you talk. I'll let you hammer this right after my first point. Is that I think baseball needs to get out of the game of trying to compete with the NFL or another league.
Yeah.
I mean, quit worrying about what everybody else is saying about your ratings or what you're watching or et cetera, et cetera. And here's the reason why. Casey, pull up the graphic. You can see right here, clear as day, that we're not even in the same league, fellas.
No.
We're not even in the same realm of possibilities with the NFL. I mean, Game 1 of the World Series that was on open air, free to view. You don't even have to have cable, theoretically, to watch this game. You can watch it for free. 11.4 million viewers, right? Do you see what the rating is on the prime time game on Thursday night between Cincinnati, small market, Miami, small market, behind a paywall on Amazon Prime is?
And half the world was at a concert that night too. So,
I mean, In all honesty.
Well, so
what are we doing?
Do you think the CW, and this is going to be an extreme example, do you think the CW compares its ratings to what CBS is putting out on Tuesday programming? Do you think
should we compare our ratings to Pat McAfee show?
Right. Do you think we're we're drawing this many viewers, active viewers? Pat McAfee's getting 2,000. At some point, you punt and just go, we've got to focus on our product.
Right.
And everyone beats the dead horse on what's wrong with baseball. What's wrong with baseball? Baseball has its devout fans and will always have its devout fans. Cater to make it a little more exciting. Stop worrying about what Big Brother NFL is doing, because you'll never be Big Brother NFL.
Right. No, you can't try to manipulate what you have as a product to try to fashion yourself to getting to where people like football. 2 reasons football are dominant, in my opinion. 1, scarcity. There's only so many games.
Sure.
They all matter.
Right.
It feels like a big deal every single week. It's made for television. I guess that's point 2. The last point I'll make, I guess 3, I went over by 1, is gambling.
Yeah.
Okay? People like to gamble. And
baseball's not a fun
baseball has not gotten to a point where it's been able to get this gambling thing, quote unquote, normalized yet. And how many people want to gamble 162 games? They're not going to do that.
Reed.
So
I'm going to.
Reed might. But outside of that, your normal person isn't going to do that. So at the end of the day, can we stop worrying about the whole thing with baseball and what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing? We'll get into some things that they can quirk or change. But the idea that you're going to compete with the NFL it's a foregone conclusion.
I have a question for you guys about baseball.
We need a topic in the chat too, by the way. I don't know if we're going to get that, but I'm gonna put some mayo on my sandwich. What do you think about that?
You guys are baseball fans, even Casey. And
Casey bigger than me.
Right, bigger than most.
The biggest.
Do people still care? Is this something that I only care about? Do people still care about the rivalry between the National League and the American League? No. I'm a National League guy. The National League's won 3 consecutive World Series. Does that matter to anybody? Or is that just me because I hang on to weird stuff in baseball and I love the game too much? I'm the only one who cares about that.
I used to have that same feeling for football, NFC and AFC.
Did you?
Yeah, and
I've never felt that.
I would get mad when people who were NFC fans say, the NFC is just way better. It's got way more talent than the AFC. And now the tables have kind of turned. Now the AFC has a loaded amount of talent, at least so we think. So I can see where you're coming from. I understand where it comes from. But I don't think people care. I think you and I would be in the minority in that case.
I know my dad cares. Man, he always talks about
Appreciate
it.
that, Excalibur.
You know what? I get pissed off more so than the World Series. I want the National League to win the All-Star game one time.
What? Just one time,
Just
right?
one time. One time they got to win the
do.
All-Star game. They never do. So I guess in that respect, I always want the National League to win the All-Star game. But to sit here and say that there's a rivalry for the whole, I don't get fired up about it like it seems like you do. Just the All-Star game for me.
Well, I would like it, to be honest, if a postseason, if they did this, and they never will because players can get hurt and the Players Association's not going to do this. You know, it'd be fun, a 7-game series between the American League and the National League after the year. Play it down in somewhere warm. Get the all-star teams to play 7 games and play legit games, not where a pitcher's coming out a new pitcher every inning, but they're playing it. Jacob deGrom's throwing 6 innings against Justin Verlander throwing 6 innings, and then we get the aces playing. And I know we have the World Baseball
What would
Classic.
they be playing for?
Just the National League, American League.
I'm gonna tell you right now.
All right.
I'm gonna admit to something I shouldn't admit to.
You haven't watched the All-Star game in 10 years, probably.
I turned on the game last night.
Oh.
I would consider myself a baseball guy. I seen the score was 5-0.
Yeah, it was 5 at one point.
And turned on Maction.
And I turned on Maction.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
So
I don't blame you.
I don't know. I mean, that's not a good look. That's a bad look. What NFL team surprised you at the trade deadline? And should the Bengals been more active from Everett?
Okay, so here's actually a question I'm quite passionate about.
Going to the chat topic, by the way.
Should the Bengals have been more active at the trade deadline?
100%.
On Twitter, all of these fans going, I can't believe the Bengals didn't do this. I can't believe the Bengals. In what world? Are you new? I mean, in what world did you ever think for a second that the Bengals were going to make a trade. That is moronic. That has never happened. I think it's been the last in-season trade that the Bengals did was before Thom was alive. It was like 1972 or something like that.
Was that a dig?
But
no, it's
that
50
doesn't
years.
That
It's a
doesn't
dig
mean
at the
we still
Bengals.
can't be upset that they didn't make a trade. Like, every other NFL team is trying to get better. But it seems to the fans.
Okay, I guess you're right.
That
But why get worked up about it? Because it was never going to happen.
I understand that point.
It'd be like being 16 years old and it's Christmas and you are very worked up at the fact that your parents did not buy you a car for Christmas. It probably was never going to happen, so don't get worked up about it.
I understand that. I mean, go ahead.
I honestly didn't really care that the Bengals didn't trade.
It was
like I was honestly, I might lean the other way. I was fine with them not trading anybody or for anybody. You have a window.
I never gave it a thought.
What?
I never gave it a thought.
Yeah. But you have this window with these guys, Jamar, Joe.
Yeah.
You're not trading draft capital away at this point. You're not trading, any of these big name players away for any other big name players.
You could have gotten Kareem Hunt for a 4th rounder.
Is that a real thing?
But
that's what they said.
That's what they say.
He's
during
like
the
27,
broadcast,
isn't he?
They said that the Browns were
How old is
shopping
he?
around Kareem Hunt for a 4th round pick.
I don't believe that.
That's I mean
I did see that somewhere.
Then you're calling Joe Buck a liar.
You could have gotten Robert Quinn for a 4th and a 7th. And
he's been called worse. He's been called worse.
I'm just saying that there's a lot of opportunities for these teams to make a trade, and they don't. And it's just like you get blown away. Like the Robert Quinn trade to me is just like, what the hell? How did the Eagles manage to pull that off?
Brian brings up a point, though. He says the Bengals value their draft capital and need to be careful from an expenditure standpoint because they need to pay Joey and they need to pay Jamar.
Okay, that's
right. But that
is Kareem Hunt on his last year of a deal or something like that because he's gonna get paid. So you'd be trading a 4th round pick away for.
Listen, the Bengals aren't going to win this year. I hate to be like that, but you're not. This year isn't.
Okay.
This year, in my opinion, isn't the year. Now, I do think that
Have
unfortunately,
a good time, find your love. I love that. We got the girls.
I love that.
Someone click on that link, see what happens. Give us a review.
They didn't
on
even
that
send a link. They just sent some cherries.
There's your cherry on top.
Right,
There's our cherry on top.
Bad history with cherries, girl.
Now, I don't even know where we're at with the Bengals, but I guess I don't want to be too negative on the Bengals. I just don't see it, man. I don't see the same thing I even seen last year in a way.
We all agree with that.
And I don't know what it is. I can't tell you exactly what it is. It just reminds me like last year from an outside looking in perspective. I didn't watch every single game of the Bengals. But when I watched the Bengals, it felt like they were just taking chances. They were letting it rip 20, 25, 30 yards down the field. And dudes were making plays. I mean, T. Higgins the other night against the Browns, that one touchdown that he had, he just straight up took that ball from the corner. Corner was in a good position. Ball was just thrown in a good spot.
On 28 teams.
So I don't, unless they get back to that type of offensive strategy or philosophy or whatever term you'd like to use, I don't see it. And the first few weeks, maybe it made them gun shy. I mean, honestly, maybe it made them gun shy the first few weeks when they weren't able to protect the quarterback. That's all I can think of.
Are Bengals fans' expectations too unrealistic? Like,
what's your expectation?
Are we jaded by the fact that we went to the Super Bowl last year to think that are you supposed to move your goalpost? I guess as a fan, I'm asking this. Are you supposed, after you get to the Super Bowl, move your goalpost to be like, that's where we should be? That's what we should be competing for every single year? Because if you would have asked a Bengals fan before last season,
right,
what would be a great year? It'd be like, if we made the playoffs, that'd be great. And I get that your goalposts move better when that happens, but the Bengals were 7-6 last year before the final 4 weeks of the year. 7-6.
Yeah.
And then they rattle off 6 wins in 8 games.
I do think that trade deadline trades are a little overrated in the NFL because it feels like one of the things that is important in the NFL is chemistry, and I feel like it's difficult to kind of get that chemistry in such a shortened period of time. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's a reason that they do summer OTAs. There's a reason there's preseason, and there's a reason that the Bengals have struggled. And like it or not, Thom was beating down this door from a while ago. I don't know if it was true or not. We all don't really know at the end of the day, but I guarantee this: the Bengals will take the preseason a hell of a lot more serious next year,
No doubt.
and we'll see if that makes a difference. All right, let's make this quick.
Scam of the day.
A scam of the day, and we're out of here.
Scam of the day. We talked about this briefly
We did.
outside. The scam of the day, scam of the day, scam of the day, scam of the day are those card readers on those credit card machines.
Damn right.
They ask you for a tip every time. And you know what that tip is? It's a tax on generous people or people who are non-confrontational. I don't want to be giving you $2 on my $2 coffee that I get from Big B Coffee or from wherever you get your coffee. Stop asking me for tips everywhere I go. I went to a concession stand not too long ago, and they had a card reader. It was nice because normally you deal with cash and everything like that. And you go, yeah, sure. Here's my card. Give me my hot dog and my Gatorade. And they said, would you like to leave a tip? I said, what? Are you kidding me? No, I do not want to leave a tip. Stop asking it. It's a tax. It's inflation to the highest degree.
And you said it, nailed it right on its head. It's a tax on the nice people.
Generous people and non-confrontational people.
It is tax on people that they're too good of a person to say that's not fair. You can't ask me for $2 when I'm spending $3. And that's the one thing that's more of a scam than any of them. They've gotten rid of, I don't know if you've been paying attention, folks, they've gotten rid of the percentages on these things.
Yep.
They've started to do it to where you can do $1, $2, $5, or other. Okay? And when you're going to a coffee shop and they flip that thing around and your only option is $2 on your $1.50 coffee, that is absolute bullshit. And at some point, these companies are going to have to pay for it. Tipping in America in and of itself is a joke. It's a joke. How can you pay people $3 an hour to work a restaurant, tell them to clean the floors, go mop down the booths, go do this, go Glenn had the asshole Karen over there that wants her latte a certain way. Forget all that shit. At the end of the day, start paying these people $10, $15 an hour to work and get rid of tips completely. Right. Tips are bullshit. Or you do agree with tips are bullshit? As a whole, forget the card reader. Tips are bullshit, period.
You want to know, tips are bullshit. We went to Agave and Rye out there in Liberty Center this Sunday for a birthday. And we had a 12, 15-person party. They already put a 20%.
Oh, the gratuity
onto the bill. And then they put the lines asking if you want to leave another tip. They don't they just bury that they already put the gratuity in your tip. So you have to actually look like, what did I pay for? Yada, yada, yada. Oh, gratuity, 20%. And then it has the audacity. And if you're just signing away, you're like, oh, there's the line. You've got to look at it, and then you have to do it again. When I went on my honeymoon last year, everywhere in Miami did this. It was the fourth day where I realized I was tipping twice.
You got anything to say, boys?
Paul.
No, I very much agree. Yeah, I had to take a hard stand I had to look myself in the mirror about 6 months ago, and I had to say, look, at some point, you just can't afford to keep doing this.
Right. When the barista pours me a black coffee.
It was, yeah. As somebody that has worked in the service industry before and appreciates a good tip, it was a hard personal conversation I had to have with myself that said at some point in this economy, I'm going to be fresh out of money if I keep tossing $1.50 at all these little places.
It's a tax on generous people.
It's tough.
Get a $2 black coffee from Big B. You hand them your card, like, that'll be $2.20, whatever. And they look you right in the eye and they say, do you want to leave a tip?
Right, they do that.
They look you right in the eye, and you're seeing this person. They've probably been through a lot. They could use this tip money.
They do that.
But you know who needs it a little more? I do. Big Dog does. Put that away. That's half of my black coffee tomorrow. I'll put it away. You don't get $1.
You know what's funny is I did see a TikTok of somebody making fun of this the other night, that they opened their door to trick or treat. Somebody took the candy out, and then somebody came around from behind the door with an iPad and said, would you like to leave a tip?
Hell yeah. And that's how it feels. I'll tell you what, I hope we clip this thing out and somebody tags Big B Coffee, because they're the worst at it. They are the worst. No free ads, but we bring them up because it's true. They're the worst at it.
Yeah,
so
this is the farthest thing from it.
I got some good news. I'm going to leave on this. I'm out of here. I got to get on a call. Paul mentioned he wanted a raise. Casey mentioned, he wants a raise. And everybody wants raises. So here's what the boss man's going to do on Friday for everybody.
Oh, baby.
I'm going to give you a free opportunity to earn a raise on Friday.
Okay. Sling it.
I want to let you know on Friday.
Okay.
Oh, these guys are excited. All right. Thank you for the chats. Appreciate you tuning in, staying with us. Obviously, we're going to keep on tagging along Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, right after Thom's show off the bench. And have a good rest of your Wednesday. See ya.
See ya.